was an up year at the end of the day. So long term, this kind of blip will pass. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Except we haven't seen the worst of this yet, according to what the health experts say. We haven't had the test to know how many people, even to have the test that South Korea has every day. So even to know how many people have the virus, let alone hearing about the deaths. And now we're going to see, for example, New York is basically on shutdown. I mean, you don't see people in restaurants. Of course, people were worried today that the buses would stop running and the subways. So it's going to get worse probably before it gets better.
That's absolutely right. I think you summed it up quite well. It will get worse before it gets better, and that's been said not just in terms of sentiment from traders as well, but from government institutions, like you've said. What is important to note here, though, is that I believe the strategists and the economists I've been talking to have said from an economic perspective, this could last from about 2 or 3 months. That's kind of the worst case scenario right now. Keep in mind, though, that as this happens, as we see traders physically move off their trading floors to backup sites, to working from home, there will be that continued uncertainty and panic in the market. So you could see volatile swings in both directions. Once again, massive sell-offs, but massive rebounds again. So something to keep in mind there for sure.
And also when we start to get numbers in about the effect on different industries, well, maybe perhaps on every industry, because you have, hotels, you have restaurants, you have just everything. Maybe the food deliverers will, I know I'm ordering out
there
a lot.
There you go.
So that may be one sector. But when we start to see that, so is the economy then, people have been talking about, well, this is a strong economy still and the fundamentals are still good. But what happens when the effects of this are measured in?
So it's largely already expected that economic data is going to take a massive hit. And what's kind of challenging about kind of measuring the economy is economic data has always kept pulse on employment numbers, on consumer confidence, all that. With this virus coming in, we kind of are in a blind spot here because any data we'll get, positive or negative, will be discounted because it'll be, oh, well, that was before the virus, or, oh, that's on the virus.
Right.
And afterwards, oh, that is pent-up demand after the virus. So you're kind of in a blind spot here. The important thing to note, though, is most economists I've spoken to have said, yes, we will see maybe 1 or 2 quarters of kind of that shutdown in economic activity, but then it will be followed by that demand pickup. So you could actually see growth on a yearly basis actually up for the year.
So just briefly, so what are you going to be looking for in President Trump's statement?
So it's hard to quantify right now. Specific numbers are helpful. Things that actual measures are being taken. Testing is a huge problem right now. So anything positive on more testing is going to happen. More clarity on the situation is going to happen. A lot of traders are actually suggesting maybe the market should be shutting down right now while there is this kind of time of panic, time of uncertainty. So anything along those lines would actually be a positive for the market, just to say, okay, we're in the all clear. We can hit pause for a second while we catch our breaths and kind of deal with these environment situations.
We'll let you catch your breath right now. Thank you so much, Kriti. That's Kriti Gupta, Bloomberg Markets live reporter. Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to be talking about courts across the country taking different steps to deal with the coronavirus, from postponing jury trials to shutting the doors. I'm June Grosso, and this is Bloomberg.
PAC needs someone to follow.
It's got to be important for somebody to have a breakout moment.
Don't look now, but they're behind you.
Imports declined 2.8%.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Sources tell us that agreement is expected to include commitments on U.S. intellectual property.
With Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
Could we see that play into the results and the forward guidance?
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you are thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg.
Yeah, so I want to upgrade to, like, the latest phone you got. Okay. All right. But, like, for an unbelievably good price. Yeah? And I want it where I could choose the length for my own contract. Yeah!
On O2, you're our headline act, which is why you can get the phone you want for less per month with a custom plan on O2.
Minimum upfront cost, direct only, device plan of 3 to 36 months, refresh credit by Telefonica UK Limited, terms apply.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off home runs.
Pitch. Swinging a line drive, slice down the right field line toward the corner. Looking up, and this one is gone!
Follow TuneIn on social media to stay in the game. From live reminders of the biggest games in every league, to staff pick recommendations of our favorite sports shows and podcasts.
You're really greedy, Dak, but nobody's thinking that
yet. You know how these contracts work. All that 40 years for 5 years for $200 million.
Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to hear more sports.
Interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all advancing. Stocks are climbing on optimism. Governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. S&P 500 index up now by 3.2%. A volatile Friday. It is getting some respite, though, after the worst day for U.S. stocks since 1987. Treasury yields are increasing as the Fed says it's buying $37 billion of bonds across maturities. Also, President Trump planning to declare a national news emergency. We're expecting that word. 3 o'clock Wall Street time. We'll have the president's remarks live for you right here on Bloomberg Radio. 10-year, the yield now 0.91%. We've got gold down 3.4%, $15.22 the ounce, and crude West Texas Intermediate up 1.7%, $32.03 a barrel. Recapping the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing 3.1% jump right now for the S&P. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that June Grasso is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. Well, the nation's top court is not scheduled to hear arguments for another 10 days, but the Supreme Court building has been closed to the public until further notice. And the federal court in Manhattan, one of the busiest dockets in the country, is joining a global slowdown of court systems in the face of the coronavirus. Virus precautions dictate social distancing. That's the exact opposite of the jury system that brings people together in close quarters. Joining me is Tina Davis, Bloomberg Legal Executive. Well, I'm having trouble talking today. Bloomberg Legal Executive Editor. So, Tina, Manhattan Federal Court is suspending jury trials and also other federal courts in the area and across the country. So tell us a little bit about what's happening.
Yeah, so they're suspending new jury trials, which is something that we've seen happen in multiple jurisdictions now as the court system tries to come to terms with exactly what they need to do in the face of this virus. So you talked about, the number of people that are called for jury duty. We're, by one estimate, about a fourth of Americans will serve on a trial over the course of their life. So we're talking about a substantial number of people. And one estimate I saw said something like 32 million Americans are called for jury duty each year. Now, not all of them show up, of course, but that's the number of summons that go out. So this is a substantial number of people. And obviously, if you're in a situation where you don't want that many people gathering, and here in New York, you can't even have 500 people gathered at a time, this does make it tricky. So what we have seen, you talked about the Manhattan, the court, the Southern District of New York, right, which is, called the Mother Court. It's the oldest federal court in the land, even older than the Supreme Court. Fun fact. And that's the court that's handled everything from, the insurance claims on the Titanic to, the Bernie Madoff trial and Martha Stewart. So this is a very high-profile court. And to see them kind of have to slow their docket down is interesting because it means, what does it mean in terms of the companies that have cases before this court? What does it mean for the criminal trials that are going on? We just recently saw the Avenatti trial in this court. So it basically is going to slow an already sort of painfully slow process in the legal system.
And what does it mean for the backlog? And once courts get back online, what's that going to look like? No one can tell yet. And things are escalating so fast because at first it was in the Manhattan court, they were banning entry to anyone who had traveled to virus hotspots like China. And little by little, and actually it's not little by little, it's quickly changes almost from day to day. So as far as the individual judges are concerned, they're taking precautions, apparently, so you don't have jury trials, but they can still do other things.
Yeah, and there are a number of courts. I mean, bankruptcy court is probably the most prevalent one, where you do see a lot of video conferencing, teleconferencing of hearings. So if you don't necessarily need a jury present, then you can carry on your business. It does make things a little bit more complicated, and we've seen some folks pushing for delays. We saw the lawyer who's defending Huawei here in New York saying that he couldn't really communicate well with his client because of coronavirus was disrupting the way they do business there. And then we've seen some high-profile court cases get delayed. We saw just this week a trial against opioid makers and distributors that got delayed. That was going to be in Suffolk County. That's a closely watched trial just in terms of sheer money, as these people are trying to reach a settlement with a lot of states. And then today, we just recently were told that the trial in which Elon Musk was due to testify starting Monday, which is a shareholder trial against Tesla for its purchase of SolarCity back in 2016, that is also going to be delayed. So we're not going to get to have the joy of Elon Musk on the witness stand.
We were watching that trial and waiting to see what would happen when he took the stand.
He never fails to make things entertaining.
Exactly. So, now, as far as people are saying, well, what about the right to a speedy trial? This short delay, we hope will be a short delay, is not going to affect that.
Well, look, there are jurisdictions in which they've said that for criminal proceedings, if folks are exerting that constitutional right, then they will try to find workarounds. But the courts are not, most of the courthouses are not completely shut down just yet. So the other thing to think about is, we saw, certainly Southern District, we saw the court system shut down completely after 9/11, very briefly. We saw the courts have to shut after Hurricane Sandy struck. So they have kind of contingency plans in place for, as you said, a short-term shutdown. What I think is still unknown is how long this lingers and how much of a backup this creates. And to be clear, it's not simply just in New York. I keep mentioning the Southern District because I'm obsessed with it. But
it's a court that, as you mentioned, some of the most high-profile trials in the nation are in the Southern District.
Yeah, exactly. But we've seen this happening in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, in Maryland, in Washington State, certainly in California. They're taking precautions. So it's really just a matter of time before the whole system is in some nature changed by what's happening with the virus. And again, it may not be a total shutdown, but it might simply mean delays.
And the federal courts in Massachusetts are suspending until April 27th, in Connecticut until April 10th. But then you wonder if those are not dates that will be moved because of more fears. We just don't know the extent of this yet. And also, only a minute here, but the Supreme Court we've been talking about how this term is filled with really important cases, very controversial cases and decisions coming out. And, the next hearing is in 10 days, the next oral arguments, but who knows if they'll take place.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we actually saw Justice Kavanaugh today. He was in Kentucky for an event, so there's a lot of questions about whether or not it was a wise decision to have him traveling at this point in time. But yeah, he's out there.
Oh, well, everyone's washing their hands, and probably no shaking of hands going on, even though you do want to shake a Supreme Court justice's hand when you see one. Thank you so much, Tina. That's Tina Davis, Bloomberg Legal Executive Editor. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the New York AG cracking down on another bogus coronavirus cure. I'm June Grosso, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are up more than 2% on optimism governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. The Dow is up 590 points, S&P up 75, the Nasdaq up 200 points. In about 2 hours, President Trump will declare a national emergency over the coronavirus outbreak, invoking the Stafford Act to open the door to more federal aid for states and municipalities. J.P. Morgan Chase now thinks we're in a recession. If GDP shrinks for at least 2 quarters, say the first half of the year, it will be confirmed. And coronavirus is changing the game for all kinds of industries. Some restaurants are thinking outside the box. Many are introducing delivery options or offering curbside service for the first time. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council. Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
For up to 50% off a choice of floors and beds, for an extra 20% off selected ranges, for first-class fitting. Morning. For 0% free credit with no deposit. For a nice surprise. Ooh. For bringing home a bargain. Heaven at long last. Carpet right for life. Offer ends Tuesday. Up to 4 years interest-free credit. Minimum spend applies.
Hairy Bikers here. This message goes out to something very special.
Yes, we're talking to you, chicken.
Maybe we've been seeing too much of each other.
But times have changed, Dave.
We've been cheating on meat.
Thing is, no stocks make veggie dishes so irresistible that cheating on meat is proper tasty.
Our dear chicken, you were the fire in my life, but it's all about you now, aubergine katsu curry. Prepare to be wined and dined, my love.
Cheat on meat with no veggie stocks.
Heading to Leeds to see the grandparents. Little one's going to get spoilt rotten. If your trip is over a week away and you haven't booked your train ticket yet, that means you're in line to book LNER's Mighty Fine 29. It's only £29 each way from London to Leeds if you travel between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday to Saturday. Nan, we're on our way. Book direct at lner.co.uk. £51,229 seats available up to a week before travel. Standard advance fares on direct trains, subject to availability.
The moment you realise you've drilled through an electric cable. The moment you realise that doesn't just mean no telly on the wall, but no telly full stop. The moment you realise you've got British Gas Home Care. And not just your electrics, but your plumbing, heating and drains are all covered. So the moment you've got a problem, make it our problem. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas Home Care.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
I'm June Grasso. Coming up on Balance of Power, the New York AG is cracking down on a bogus coronavirus cure, and it's not the first one. But first, let's go to Charlie Pellet to find out what's happening.
All right, we've just seen another leg higher for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, June Grasso. Let me give you the numbers first. I'll get to the why in just a moment. Right now, the Dow is up 974 points. That is a gain of 4.6%. S&P 500 index up 108, a gain there of 4.4%. NASDAQ higher by 290 points. That is a gain of 4%. Keeping an eye on palladium, tumbling as much as 24% on NYMEX. Gold is down now by 3.1%. $15.17 the ounce, 58. That is a drop right now of about $58 an ounce for the precious metal. Stocks are climbing on optimism. Governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. S&P is trading trading higher. It has been a volatile session, providing some respite after the worst day for stocks yesterday since 1987. The gauge bouncing off lows after reports G7 governments will coordinate virus responses, and President Trump is planning to declare a national emergency. We will be hearing from the president 3 o'clock Wall Street time. Yes, we'll have that for you live right here on Bloomberg Radio. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index dipped this month, snapping a six-month streak of gains. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The coronavirus is disrupting Main Street. This month's Consumer Sentiment Index reading 95.9 is the lowest since October. Richard Curtin, survey director, says the data suggests early reaction to the coronavirus reflects a perception that it's temporary. That's not to say we won't see further declines, especially if the outbreak intensifies. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
After earnings, Oracle shares are up 14.4%. Oracle topping analyst estimates for quarterly sales, also announcing a $15 billion share buyback program. Apple shares are advancing today. They're up 5.6%, but Apple says its annual WWDC conference will be online only this year, scrapping a gathering that usually attracts thousands of software developers. The 10-year, the yield now 0.95%. What a week there. We've got gold down 3.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude closing in on 32 again, 31.97 right now. WTI up by 1.5%. Recapping, another turbulent day for the U.S. stock market with the S&P up by 4.2%. I'm Charlie Pellett, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones claimed that a toothpaste he sells, quote, kills the whole SARS corona family at point-blank range, is the latest bogus silver-based cure to come under legal scrutiny, with the New York Attorney General ordering Jones to immediately cease and desist from selling the product on his right-wing website, InfoWars. Joining me from our D.C. studios is Bloomberg legal reporter Eric Larson. Eric, tell us about the claims that Jones made about this and how many he sold.
Well, the claims are actually fairly vague. He just told his viewers that they generally protect against coronavirus, and it's been known to stop them in their tracks, that sort of thing. Doesn't really give any specific health claims about how exactly it does that. He just vaguely said that the U.S. government even backs his claims that this silver-based toothpaste he sells on his website can fight the virus. And obviously, this is the sort of thing that a lot of people are listening for right now, anything to protect them.
And the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says on its website that colloidal silver, which consists of tiny silver particles in a liquid, isn't proven to support health. In fact, it could be dangerous to your health. So tell us about the cease and desist order from the New York AG and whether she's also suing.
She hasn't sued yet. That would depend on how Alex Jones responds to this letter, but a lawsuit is certainly possible. Last week, she went after a televangelist named Jim Baker, who was also had someone on his show making similar claims about another silver-based product. And she sent a cease and desist letter there. We'll wait to see what happens with that. But clearly, this strange silver-based products seem to be a catch-all for health benefits.
I was going to ask you that. Is there any reason why they're focusing on this kind of silver base?
You know, I honestly don't know. I Googled it, like I guess probably a lot of people did. And it seems like these kinds of products have been around for a while. They make a really just wide variety of claims about general improvements to health, that sort of thing. You can find a lot of them on a lot of different websites. I think the real issue that the Attorney General in this case had clearly was with the claim that it could do something with this virus. And it was a very straightforward statement by Alex Jones about how it could protect people. And the Attorney General has been saying that she is looking out for these sorts of claims being made by anyone, and that she has asked the public as well to report any of claims like this that they feel are false or that people are giving misleading claims.
I've been getting announcements from the New York AG's office since this crisis started, where she's warning about these things and warning companies not to engage in this kind of behavior. I understand also from your story that the Missouri Attorney General has sued that televangelist Baker this week.
Yeah, that's right. And it showed he's a Republican, Eric Schmidt of Missouri, and Letitia James is a Democrat. So that shows that, this is a bipartisan issue here, these false claims being made about protections from the virus. And he did take the cue from New York. He went ahead and filed a lawsuit. So he went a little further for now than Tish James has. But clearly this is something that people are taking very seriously, they're not letting politics get involved.
And in states, the Attorney General, that's the position where you expect the Attorney General to protect the public from scams and health claims and things like this. Besides, the New York AG, you always hear about her suing companies, but this is really the sort of the ground that she really has to work on.
Yeah, a lot of states' attorneys general have consumer protection laws that they are required to enforce. This is obviously a pretty high-profile one, especially considering that Alex Jones is very well known. He's had President Trump on his show back when he was campaigning in 2015. He's pretty influential in those circles. He's had all kinds of conspiracy theories out there that have been debunked, but he still has quite a large following.
Now, the parents of 2 children killed at Sandy Hook in 2012 sued him.
That's right. He really pushed this conspiracy theory that the massacre at the Sandy Hook Elementary School was a so-called false flag that the government had perpetrated in order to create an excuse to take away people's guns. He has sort of backtracked from that claim, but by the time he did that, already many people had latched onto it. And he was sued for defamation, though that's sort of ongoing, and some of his listeners, or at least people who had the same views, have also been sued.
Also, he sued Chobani last year after he settled with Chobani last year after accusing the company of, quote, importing migrant rapists. And the yogurt company sued, and a tweet and a video related to the accusation were removed, and there was a settlement. And we don't know what that settlement is, because it's those settlements we never learned until much later how they are. But so I guess this is par for the course. So is there anything else the Attorney General has been doing? Just about a minute here, as far as this crisis is concerned in the city?
I reached out to her office right away once this started happening and asked what they were going to be looking at. And they really were focusing on the price gouging element. A lot of state AGs actually have been doing that. They're urging people to report any price gouging for things like, hand sanitizers or soap or anything like that. And we've seen that has been happening. I think just the other day, the New Jersey Attorney General, they had someone arrested, a 7-Eleven owner, because he was selling a fake spray intended to help people, and it burned several children. So this is something that the states are
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off home runs.
Pitch. Swinging a line drive, slice down the right field line toward the corner. Looking up, and this one is gone!
Follow TuneIn on social media to stay in the game. From live reminders of the biggest games in every league, to staff pick recommendations of our favorite sports shows and podcasts.
Yeah, but you're really greedy, Dak, but nobody's thinking that
Skip,
yet.
you know how these contracts work. All that 40 years for 5 years for $200 million.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to hear more sports.
Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. What a week. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. Another turbulent day on Wall Street. Right now a 916-point gain in the Dow. That's an advance of 4.3%. S&P up 104, higher by 4.2%. And NASDAQ up 284 points, a gain right now of 4%. The 10-year, the yield 0.92%. Gold down 3.7%, 15.17 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.1%, 32.18 a barrel. Brent up 3.6%, 34.41 for a barrel of Brent. S&P 500 index advancing in a volatile session, providing some respite after the worst day for stocks since 1987. The gauge bouncing off lows after reports G7 governments will coordinate virus responses, and President Trump planning to declare a national emergency. President, by the way, speaking at 3 o'clock Wall Street time. We'll have that for you live right here on Bloomberg Radio. Treasury yields increasing today as the Federal Reserve says it is buying $37 billion of bonds across maturities. Among the companies reporting earnings, Oracle topping analyst estimates for quarterly sales, signaling that demand for the company's cloud services is holding up in the face of an economic slowdown caused by the coronavirus outbreak. Company also announcing a $15 billion share buyback program. We've got Oracle up now by just about 14.5%. Apple says its annual WWDC conference will be online only this year, scrapping a gathering that usually attracts thousands of software developers. Apple says, quote, WWDC 2020 will take on an entirely new online format, citing, quote, the current health situation. Again, we have got shares of Apple. They are advancing up now by 5.7%. Among the other stocks that are moving today, Charles Schwab forecasts first quarter revenue growth and says record client inflows are likely to blunt the impact of coronavirus-related market declines. Shares up now by 16%. Again, a 16% jump in shares of Charles Schwab. It did bring in a record $45 billion in new assets in the first 2 months of the year. Recapping, S&P up 4.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie Pellet. Well, can workers get unemployment benefits if they miss time on the job because of the coronavirus and the efforts to combat it? The Labor Department said yesterday that states can pay unemployment insurance benefits to those workers, but a lot more has to be done. Joining me is Chris Opfer, Bloomberg Law reporter. So, Chris, does this include not only people who miss work because they get the virus or are self-quarantined, but those who perhaps decide not to go to work to avoid exposure?
That's right. It potentially does. What the DOL said yesterday is that states have some flexibility here to expand their unemployment insurance offerings and to include folks that are staying away from work to avoid exposure. They also said that states can make the benefits available to people who are staying home to care for a loved one, as well as people who are losing time on the job because companies are limiting their operations or closing down completely.
So do the states have to pass legislation to get this done, or is it in rules?
I think that's a state-by-state situation. The key here is, from the guidance yesterday, is that states can do this, but they don't have to do it. And so we'll see states moving individually in the coming days to try to update their systems. Some of them will have to go through the state legislatures. Others are run through administrative offices, which may have some regulatory flexibility, particularly in situations that are deemed emergencies, to make some of these changes on their own, at least in the short term.
So which states are already doing something with regard to this?
So California put out a notice to workers yesterday as well, telling them that they should be aware that any sort of reduction in their hours related to coronavirus factors would make them eligible for unemployment insurance. And at the same time, we've seen both New Hampshire and Colorado, the governors there working with the legislatures to broadly expand the unemployment insurance offerings to include some of these situations that we were talking about, whether it's quarantine, somebody who's tested positive, or someone who's just staying away from work to avoid exposure.
Will the president declaring a national emergency direct more funds to the states for things like this?
That's a great question, and that's probably what we're going to see. That's the last time that we saw that in Congress was in the recession during the Obama administration, where Congress worked with the administration there to provide extended emergency unemployment benefits. So in that case, typically states provide up to 26 weeks of unemployment insurance. In that case, we saw them expand it by as much as 12 or 24 weeks in many cases. And so I think this time around, you're already seeing folks in Congress on both sides of the aisle talking about what can be done to bolster the unemployment insurance system. Although the Labor Department oversees that system generally, there's a lot of flexibility that's left to the states to determine who's eligible and how much they get. And so as states are moving to expand these things, they're also going to be coming back to the federal government and saying we need more money in order to pay for that expansion.
Now, what about the package that House Democrats have put together? Does that include anything about unemployment insurance?
Yes, it does. The House Democrats package would include bolstering the unemployment fund, essentially, by providing as much as $1 billion in emergency transfers to states so that they can process unemployment insurance claims and they can also pay out benefits. Those benefits are largely funded by employer tax contributions. So if there were any additional taxes here, it would take some time to catch up, and the states are going to be saying we need the money now.
Do you know if that is that element of the Democrats' package is popular or acceptable to Republicans as well?
It sounds like that's got some support across the aisle, and certainly it's safe to say that there's support generally for doing things to make sure that there's a safety net there in terms of unemployment insurance. That piece of the package is getting a lot less, I think, debate than other pieces of the package that would include mandatory paid leave, not only for the duration of this coronavirus crisis, but the piece that Democrats are pushing would just institute a national paid leave program as part of the package, and that piece of it is getting a lot more a harder look from Republicans on the Hill.
What kind of protection do gig workers have? Workers in the gig economy, and the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers. Do they have any kinds of protections?
The short answer is no. By and large, gig workers like Uber and Lyft drivers are treated as independent contractors rather than employees. And because they don't have that employee status, they are generally not eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. Now, we have seen some companies like Lyft and Uber come out and say that they're thinking about ways that they can help drivers who are not getting the same hours on the job that they would otherwise, whether that's by bolstering their wages or providing some other sort of benefits. We haven't seen any concrete proposals there yet, and I think a lot of folks are going to be pointing to this situation as an example of the situation that gig workers are in right now. There's been a lot of talk in California and here in New York. There have been efforts to make those gig workers employees so that they get some of these basic protections and benefits under the law. And this is an example of what happens potentially when they don't get those benefits.
Yeah, there are so many cases of that, lawsuits and different kinds of regulations being offered, it's hard to keep track of exactly where it stands. Thank you so much, Chris. That was really enlightening. That's Chris Opfer. He's a Bloomberg law reporter. Coming up, we're going to have Bloomberg Business Week with Jason Kelly, who is here, and Carol Masser. So, Jason, President Trump is speaking at 3, so...
Yeah, we're going to bring that to you live, obviously, and expected to declare, as I'm sure you've been talking about, a state of emergency. The market's certainly embracing that idea. Finally, it feels like we're seeing a coordinated global response. So we'll see what the market makes of it all.
We will all be listening at 3 p.m. That's coming up next. Bloomberg Business Week with Jason Kelly and Carol Masser. I'm June Grosso. This is Bloomberg.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe?
We've all been in one, but how much do you really know about black cabs? For instance, did you know that a black cab has to be tall enough to accommodate an individual wearing a bowler hat? That's a lot of space for you and your briefcase. Or that Free Now drivers can use the bus lanes, the perfect getaway to make your meeting in time. And with 2-minute central London pickups, you needn't waste time searching for a taxi. Just download the Free Now app today and take the hassle out of getting round London.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
It's Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
And live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming on YouTube. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is, Friday the 13th. And President Trump, he is expected to declare a national emergency. We are expecting comments from the president. We're also expecting comments from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
We'll bring you those. Pelosi first as soon as they happen. The president coming up at 3 o'clock, give or take, Wall Street time. This is part of what the market is reacting to, Carol. A coordinated government response across the globe, or at least the thought that it might start happening.
Fingers crossed, because it's expectation, so we'll see what we ultimately get. Let's get a check on your top business stories. Really, a check on that trading day. We've got a rally, but I think we're off our highs, Charlie.
Absolutely right about that, Carol Masser. Let me give you the numbers. We'll give you the story behind the numbers in just a moment. Up 905 right now on the Dow Industrials. That is an advance on this Friday. Head of the weekend, they're up by 4.3%. S&P up 99 points right now. That is a gain of 4%. And the NASDAQ Composite Index up now by 268 points for NASDAQ. That is a move higher today, up by 3.8%. The 10-year, the yield on the 10-year, 0.91%. Gold down $51 the ounce. Correct, down 51. That is a drop of 3.3%. An ounce of the precious metal right now, $15.24. Crude surging 2.4%. WTI West Texas Intermediate traded here in New York, $32.24 a barrel. Stocks higher on optimism that governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. Recapping S&P up 94, a gain of 3.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser. And as we've been talking about the last couple of days, it's a takeover issue of Bloomberg Business Magazine. We are following suit to a large extent because it is the story of the day. We're going to have a couple writers and editors from the magazine along with us to take us inside what's happening with those most at risk for the virus, and also what experts are telling clients and students about coping with the outbreak.
Well, as you've been talking, and I think so rightfully so, is we're definitely getting a feel of how this will or is affecting our daily lives. So we're going to have some advice on how to get through it and what's to come. Those expert voices include an administrator and doctor at the center of the coronavirus. We're going to go out to Seattle, Washington. Also, former director of the U.S. National Security Council at the State Department on that council. So he's got some really great insight in terms of crises and what goes on in the nation's capital.
Absolutely. And we're also going to hear from a billionaire real estate investor. He's got some thoughts on how it's been handled and maybe how he's thinking about it when it comes to the real estate world. In the meantime, let's set the Business Week agenda as we await the Speaker of the House. Kriti Gupta is here, Markets Live reporter for Bloomberg, as is Dave Wilson, stocks editor. Dave, want to start with you. Different tone in the market today, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely, no question. Although it hasn't been, shall we say, a one-way rebound. I mean, we saw stocks move up early on, then pull back around midday, and now they're relatively close to their highs of the day. So some hesitation for sure, but, after the biggest drop in the S&P 500 since October 1987, I suppose that's to be expected.
All right, Kriti, come on in here real quick. What's the one thing you guys are talking about on the desk that investors need to know?
It really just how the treasuries are trading right now, that traditional haven bid, really not so traditional and not so much a haven anymore.
Explain that. Explain that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, when you're seeing these kind of risk-off moves, this volatility in stock markets, what you really want to go into is things that you can get in and out of easily, especially ahead of the weekend. Traditionally, you see that move into treasuries. You see the yield really dropping there. Now we're kind of seeing the reverse. We see a lot more movement in those treasuries.
So moving up
and down. So it's kind of intraday choppiness.
All right, we want to take you to the nation's capital. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Our nation has been faced with a grave and accelerating challenge, one that tests our compassion, ingenuity, and resolve, the coronavirus crisis. Sadly and prayerfully, we have learned of the tragic deaths of at least 41 Americans from this public health emergency so far. The American people expect and deserve a coordinated, science-based, and whole-of-government response to keep them and their loved ones safe. A response that puts families first to stimulate the economy. To put families first, last week the House passed a strong bipartisan $8.3 billion emergency funding package of entirely new funds. We made a well-funded, evidence-based investment in public health, in developing treatments and the vaccine available to all, in prevention, preparedness, and response measures, and helping state, local, tribal, and territorial hospitals and health systems, and in supporting impacted small businesses with SBA loans, and helping families by extending telemedicine services no matter where they live. Democrats' swift action to pass this emergency funding was essential to our nation's long overdue response. Next, Senate Democratic leader Schumer and I, last weekend, called for further action to put families first. Today, we are passing a bill that does just that, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is focused directly on providing support for America's families, who must be our first priority. The three most important parts of this bill are testing, testing, testing. This legislation facilitates free coronavirus testing for everyone who needs a test, including the uninsured. We can only defeat this outbreak if we have an accurate determination of its scale and scope so that we can pursue the precise science-based response that is necessary. To put families first, our legislation secures paid leave with 2 weeks of paid sick leave and family and medical leave for those affected by the virus. And for those who lose their jobs, we are strengthening unemployment insurance, a critical step to protect workers' economic security. Putting families first, our legislation protects our children. and particularly the tens of millions of little children who rely on the free or reduced price lunch they receive at school for their food security. As schools are being closed, these children will be deprived of their meals. Our bill takes aggressive action to strengthen food security initiatives, including student meals, as well as SNAP, seniors' meals, and food banks. As we develop our next steps, we will continue to listen to and benefit from the expertise of scientists, healthcare professionals, public health officials, and community leaders so that we can craft the most effective evidence-based response. Our nation, our great nation, has faced crises before, and every time, thanks to the courage and optimism, patriotism, and perseverance of the American people, we have prevailed. Now, working together, we will once again prevail, and we will come out stronger than before. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
All right, that was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Short and sweet, but certainly to the point. Of course, speaking from the Capitol. And what's interesting is it's called, I think, the Families First Coronavirus Act. And it does include things like paid sick leave, but most importantly, it includes testing, which has been something that has been worrying all of Americans. And that, as she said, what's, three priorities: testing, testing, and testing.
Well, and we do know from our Bloomberg reporting that she and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, they have spoken 6 times today alone.
8 times.
8 times today?
As of 1:49 p.m., it was 8 times. So you could, but listen, that speaks to, Jason, as we talk about this story constantly moving and fluid, and just how many times they've been going back and forth today.
All right. 20 seconds, Kriti Gupta, your final thoughts here?
Well, let's just take a look at what the price action is off that statement. You're seeing stocks kind of pair some earlier gains here. Still not a massive move downwards, still up about 3% on the day.
What do investors want?
Dave Wilson, I bet you have a better
some
answer.
kind of a solution that works.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Well, we are eagerly awaiting hearing from the President of the United States. That's coming up at 3 p.m. Wall Street time. In the meantime, thank you to Kriti Gupta, Markets Live reporter for Bloomberg, and Dave Wilson, Stocks Editor. We'll see you back a little bit later on.
Kriti's right, though. You're seeing markets take another leg down, certainly on the equity market. So this is not necessarily what investors want to hear. We're going to have more analysis on this, obviously, and we will be hearing from the President, I think, at the top of the 3 p.m. Wall Street time hour. All right, in the meantime, let's get to World and National News headlines. Nancy Lyons has had a busy day. She's with us from our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol, how are you? Yes, as we just heard, there has been a scramble among lawmakers and the Trump administration to come up with some sort of coronavirus aid package to reassure anxious Americans. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says they have a plan called Families First.
Today, we are passing a bill that does just that, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is focused directly on providing support for America's families, who must be our first priority. The 3 most important parts of this bill are testing, testing, testing.
Anthony Fauci, a key player in the effort to combat the coronavirus, says the frustrating delay in testing for the disease is getting untangled and that he foresees a major escalation in access in a week or 2. He spoke today on MSNBC.
There was a disconnect there for sure. We have to admit that. It's unfortunate, but it's going in the right direction right now. No denying there was a bit of a disconnect where people hear that a test could be available to anybody and they go into a doctor's office and they didn't get it. That's unfortunate, but what we're looking now is looking forward.
Fauci is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Public Health at NIH. More fallout from the virus today in sports. Both the Boston Marathon and the Masters Golf Tournament have been postponed. The marathon has been rescheduled for September 14th. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Two people who are as fascinated by the markets as you are.
What's your sense of the competitive landscape in the cloud business?
Lisa Abramowitz.
People were talking about potential regulatory pressure.
And Paul Sweeney.
Are you seeing flows into ESG ETFs?
Bloomberg Markets.
What's your main conversation today with some of these corporate executives?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
They're spending a lot of money there.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the market.
Get to know the real Ant McPartlin with the paper that knows him best. From the woman who saved him to the best friend who never gave up on him. Read all about how the troubled star beat his demons in an exclusive 24-page magazine special. Only in the Sun on Sunday this weekend.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
True heroes make it all look so effortless. Like your Hotpoint multi-flow oven from Curry's PC World. It cooks the perfect roast chicken thanks to the evenly distributed heat and keeps your oven spotless. All the grease is removed by catalytic liners so you can spend more time cooking and less time cleaning. Plus, you'll even get a 1 in 10 chance of winning £500 when you buy any Hotpoint Easy Clean oven. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Terms and register at curryswin500.co.uk.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. U.S. stocks higher across the board, and repeating our earlier headline, the Bank of Canada cutting its policy rate to 0.75%. We are 43 minutes away from President Trump's scheduled remarks. He'll be addressing the nation. We'll have that for you live right here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 index up now by 90 points. That's a gain of 3.6%. Stocks are advancing on optimism. Governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. S&P, as I mentioned, higher by 89 points at 2569. The Dow Jones Industrial Average above 22,000 at 22,015, higher by 824 points, up by 3.9%. NASDAQ up 238 points. That is a gain right now of just about 3.3%. 10-year yield 0.90%. Gold tumbling down 3%, lower by $47 the ounce. Right now, $15.28. West Texas Intermediate crude $31.99 a barrel, up by 1.6%. Again, recapping here, stocks are advancing. S&P up by 90, a gain of 3.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser. So this story caught our attention about the U.S. clearing Roche's coronavirus test. That's 10 times faster. Want to get into this with Dr. Amy Compton-Phillips. She's Chief Clinical Officer, Executive VP at Providence St. Joseph Health. She's joining us on the phone from Everett, Washington. Remember, the first U.S. case of the virus confirmed in Washington State at Providence Regional Medical Center in Everett. So part of the hospital system that Dr. Amy Compton-Phillips works at. Got to say, Dr. Compton-Phillips, so great to have you here. I feel like you have been one of the more informed voices for us on this. You talked about reaching out to Roche earlier in the week with us about looking to get up those reagents which are necessary for the testing. Can you clarify for our world and our listeners and viewers where we are on a test for more Americans?
We are, well, thank you so much for having me back again. And, one of the downsides of being early on in the epicenter of the initial outbreak is we've had to learn early and learn fast, and want to make sure that we're sharing what we're learning rapidly with the rest of the country so you can avoid going down our path. And what we're learning about the test is that the reagents, the logjam is slowly starting to break. It's not broken up yet, but with commercial labs coming online, with Roche really increasing their capacity, their manufacturing capacity, that we are starting to see a little glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. And so while we don't yet have great capacity, we're still looking at, with the existing tests, anywhere from the best turnaround time is about a day, and there's often it's 3 to 4 days till we get a test back. We're at least starting to see some opening up.
Well, Dr. Compton-Phillips, I have to say, just as an aside, we do really enjoy talking to you. And as soon as we saw this news break, Carol turned to me in the newsroom and said, we have to call Amy. So we really do appreciate it. And we just call you Amy. Sorry. We should probably be more respectful.
It's a lot shorter than Compton-Phillips, I guess.
There you go. But I do have to ask you, we just heard from the Speaker of the House, who essentially said the core of the proposal, the bill that they have passed, is testing. Remind us why. It may seem obvious, and certainly seems obvious, I'm sure, to you, why testing is so important and why it being the missing link in all this has really held back our response.
It's a great question. In order for us to mitigate spread, in order for us to actually start containing without shutting down the entire country, this virus, we have to know who has it. And because this virus can cause very mild symptoms, just cold kinds of symptoms, in about 80% of people, maybe a mild flu with congestion, a little bit of headache, a little bit of aches and pains. Well, that happens a lot this time of year, cold and flu season. And so we need to understand who has the regular cold, flu, even hay fever right now, and who has COVID, so that we can make sure people with COVID stay isolated and don't pass the germ on to other people, and so we can actually start limiting the spread.
So what's going on in cities and states around the country, that's what we need to do. I know Dr. Anthony Fauci, I think, came out and said something about, everyday life could last up to 8 weeks in terms of disruptions in our everyday life. But what we're doing, the shutting down, this is kind of equivalent to what China did in terms of their quarantine.
It's exactly right. In fact, we had a nice long call this morning with some clinicians that are still in the thick of it, but they're much on the upswing in China, and that's exactly what they did. They basically shut everything down. They limited all human-to-human contact because they didn't have the testing capacity for everybody. So they just assumed everybody had it until proven otherwise, and so they had people with their temperature taken before they came in and went out of any building. If you left a city, a town, you had to self-quarantine again for 14 days. There was very strict social distancing that was dramatically enforced in China. And now, because they did that early, now they're actually getting their economy back up and running again, right, and are able to restart. And so by clamping down early, they were actually able to stop the spread.
All right, and tell us what's going on the ground there where you are at this point. Where are we?
Where we are is we know that we have a significant number of people with the disease, and it's around 3 weeks after, for people who it's going to get bad in and actually turn into pneumonia and need hospitalization and support, about 3 weeks from the time you get the disease to the time that you have to get admitted to the hospital. And so we are anticipating, and we're rapidly ramping up our capacity to care for people, including things like ICU beds and ventilator beds. And so we're very much looking forward to hearing what the president says, because we suspect that our demand in the Seattle area is going to outstrip the supply of capacity that we have. And so we're going to be looking for assistance.
Yeah, I'm hearing about that a lot from the medical community. So just clarify for me. So if you think you've been exposed, you need to stay home for 2 weeks.
Absolutely. You need to stay home for 2 weeks. You just need to keep yourself isolated, with the exception of first responders and healthcare workers. And what the CDC guidance says right now is if you are a healthcare worker and you are a first responder, because virtually everybody's had an exposure at this point. You keep going to work wearing a mask and monitor yourself for any symptoms. And as soon as you have symptoms, then you self-isolate.
Right. Just 20 seconds. What's the symptom that everybody should really be watching out for themselves that says that maybe something might be fever? High fever.
Fever above 100.4 degrees. If it's above 100.4 degrees, then that's when you pay attention.
All right. That's why we talked to you. Thank you so much. It's direct and to the point. And I know she's got a busy world right now, but so we really appreciate her checking in with us a couple times this week. Dr. Amy Compton-Phillips, she's Chief Clinical Officer, Executive VP at Providence St. Joseph Health, on the phone from Everett, Washington. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, Jason Kelly, coming up, one of the most read stories.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are off their session lows, but below their early highs. Traders are optimistic that governments and central banks will step up their efforts to ease the economic shock from COVID-19. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 775, the S&P 500 up 83, the Nasdaq Composite up 220. The New York Stock Exchange says it plans to keep its trading floor open while some employees work from home. It says it would switch to fully electronic trading if the floor needs to close. The nation's biggest banks want to show their strength in the face of COVID-19. They're opposing suggestions that the Fed postpone annual stress tests. Major banks are supposed to submit their data by April 6th. As pro sports go dark due to COVID-19, employees of at least one team will keep their paychecks. Owners of the NHL's New Jersey Devils say hourly workers and event staff at the team's arena will be paid through the regular season. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the...
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You ace vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesman the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
You've heard the phrase, the voice of experience. There's actually more than one of them.
It's really a fascinating company.
The voices of experience tell their stories to Barry Ritholtz on Masters in Business, Saturdays at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to take you behind the scenes at the White House. This is a story many people are talking about inside this building and outside, and I'm guessing in Washington, too.
Yeah, totally. It's among our most read stories on the Bloomberg. We'll get there in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to the trading day and update on some of your top stories with the one and only Charlie Pellet.
Thank you very much. We got 28 minutes to go ahead of President Trump's speech. Coming up top of the hour, we'll have it for you live here on Bloomberg Radio. The president is expected to declare a national emergency. Stocks have declined since our last update. We've got the S&P now up by 65 points. That is a gain of 2.6%. The Dow rallying by almost 600 points, up 597, a gain of 2.8%. What a week. NASDAQ up today by 170 points. That is a gain there of 2.4%. For the week, S&P 500 index down 14%. And at a news conference this morning, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin was asked what message he's got for Americans looking at their 401ks.
My comment is don't stare at the screen, okay? It'll be higher a year from now, as I said. People who weathered the crash in 1987, people who weathered the financial crisis. For long-term investors, the U.S. is the best place to invest in the world. And again, I can't predict where the market is on a daily basis. People should be less concerned about going up and down.
Whatever you do, though, keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio for the very latest and stay with us right through the closing bell. Again, we've got the S&P up now by 63, up by 2.6%. Oracle shares surging 12.9% at topped analyst estimates for quarterly sales, signaling that demand for the company's cloud services is holding up in the face of an economic slowdown caused by the coronavirus. The company also announced that $15 billion share buyback program. And Apple says its annual WWDC conference will be online only this year, scrapping a gathering that usually attracts thousands of software developers. Oracle, as I mentioned, up by 12.3%. Apple shares, they are up now by 3.8%. Gold is down 3.8%, 15.17 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1%, 31.82 a barrel. Recapping, stocks higher, S&P up 2.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, as we just alluded to a minute ago, one of the most read stories, I have to say, I couldn't put it down, really takes you inside the administration's response in the moments leading up to that big speech that the president gave that, let's be honest, really disappointed investors. The headline, Inside the Oval Office, a fierce fight over Trump's virus speech. Josh Wingrove was one of the rock stars who wrote it. He joins us on the phone from the White House. A busy week, Josh, we know. Thank you so much for making some time. Take us inside. What happened?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. And forgive me if you hear some sound. We're about to go into the Rose Garden here because the president is going to take shot number 2, I guess, to calm markets, which are doing better today than yesterday. But they, we rewind it to Wednesday, and they had this big debate in the Oval Office with many of the president's aides, a dozen or more of them, and they were arguing over whether to go forward with these Europe bans. And in particular, they were arguing about whether it would trigger even a depression. And Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin warned against that. Larry Kudlow, one of the president's top economic advisors, his top economic advisor, I'd argue, warned about that. Whereas others said, you know what, we have to do this ban. We have to take what they viewed as a health approach. And on that side of the ledger, you had, other folks like Robert O'Brien and Alex Azar, the health secretary. So it was this really tension. Trump at one point actually even sent them to another room to sort it out and come back with a plan. And what they came back with is what was announced. And so Trump, of course, went on air that night. It was a rocky delivery. They had to walk back a few different things that he sort of stumbled on or misstated. And, of course, markets tanked the next day, for a range of reasons. And so, this is a president who's really preoccupied with markets. He measures a lot of himself by the markets. And I think we're going to see in about half an hour him, as I said, take another shot at turning things around.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So what's his chief voice on all of this?
Well, the thing on the Wednesday panel is that the economy guys kind of lost out. That was the surprise to us. So it was more Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, his daughter and aide, and forgive me, again, it's noisy here at the White House now.
We got you.
Alex Azar, the health secretary. They were the ones that were sort of the last people standing in the room. And, of course, Vice President Mike Pence, who's heading up this panel, the coronavirus task force. But it was the other ones, Mnuchin, who's been out a lot today talking about the economic issues, who were warning, listen, we can't do too much to add shocks to the economy. This travel ban might not, in the eyes of some, work. It might, the horse is already at the barn. You have community spread cases in the U.S., and we should be focusing efforts on controlling that.
Right.
So that was the tension there.
I will say, we just talked to Dr. Amy Compton-Phillips. She's out there in Seattle. They are at ground zero. The first case, in terms of the virus, was at their hospital system. And she said it is all about kind of containment at this point, basically a U.S. version of a quarantine. So I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she would be supportive of something like this where people are not moving around and kind of staying in their homes and locking down social contact.
Well, and if there's help for testing. I mean, that was
number one.
That is number one, it sounds like, overall. So, Josh, I have to ask you, I'm sure you're talking to your sources about this, smart folks in politics. How much of this is just crisis time, and how much of this is this administration in particular?
I mean, I guess it's a bit of both. They view this as a key test. It's an election year, and everything is being run through the lens of an election year. Yeah. As I said, he's been running on the economy. He used to do every speech he gave. He cited the Dow. Of course, he stopped doing that, and he's of course had to scrap these rallies now because of fears of this virus. So I think that it's a mix. I think that they both think that this is a genuine health issue that, of course, any government, Democrat or Republican, needs to respond to. But they also view this as almost existential to Trump himself, in particular because of the market jitters that are coming part and parcel with it and are fueled, of course, in addition by that oil price drop, which is not, giving any calm to markets as well.
Hey, Josh, just got about 45 seconds here, and I know you're crazed, too, getting ready for what we might hear from the president. What might we hear from the president? Do you have any idea?
So there's two things I think we're looking for in particular. The first is whether they have a deal on a bill. Pelosi did not really specify about whether the bill she's proposing has been agreed to by Republicans. We're going to listen for that. Secondly, I think we're going to have him run through a lot of the measures that they've already taken today. You mentioned testing. They've done a lot of things to expand testing today. I think he'll run through those, and we'll be seeing whether they do anything more to really expand the availability of tests. America has been a real laggard in getting tests widely available. available.
All right. Listen, Josh, I know it's a busy day for you. We really appreciate checking in. Josh Wingrove, White House correspondent at Bloomberg News, on his way to the Rose Garden. A headline did cross Trafigure. They are a commodity trading and logistics company based out there in, I believe, Singapore. They say that they see oil demand contracting by the most in history. All right. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
Let's head down to Washington. Back down to Washington. Nancy Lyons is there from our 99.1 newsroom with World and National Headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Thanks, Jason. President Trump will be holding a news conference at the top of the hour. He is expected to declare a national emergency over the coronavirus outbreak. People familiar with the matter tell Bloomberg he will invoke the Stafford Act to open the door to more federal aid to states and municipalities. The administration is coming under pressure as governors and mayors all across the country shut down schools, cancel public events. The last time a president declared an emergency over a disease outbreak was when President Bill Clinton declared emergencies in New York and New Jersey. That was back in 2000 in response to the West Nile virus. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Public Health at NIH, told ABC's Good Morning America today he believes it will get worse before it gets better.
It's going to be at least a matter of several weeks. I mean, it's unpredictable, but if you look at historically how these things work, it'll likely be anywhere from a few weeks to up to 8 weeks or more.
He says the situation with testing is being corrected. One of the traditional rites of spring will not be happening. Officials at Augusta National today postponed the Masters golf tournament. Chairman Fred Ridley said the ever-increasing risks associated with the widespread coronavirus outbreak forced their hand. He says he's confident the decision is appropriate. The Boston Marathon has also been postponed. It'll now be run on September 14th, according to Mayor Marty Walsh.
Our plan is to make the weekend of September 14th a cornerstone in a campaign to help businesses, local businesses, recover from this.
The marathon, traditionally run on Patriots Day, pumps more than $200 million into Boston's economy. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Learn more at SEIC.com/seaschange.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, 13 minutes away from remarks from President Trump. He plans to declare a national emergency. We'll have his remarks live right here on Bloomberg Radio. Stocks continue to advance, climbing on optimism. Governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. S&P up now by 84 points. That is a gain of 3.4%. Dow Industrials up 773 points, a gain right now of 3.7%. NASDAQ higher by 222 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is an advance right now of 3.1%. We've got the 10-year yield, 0.91%. Gold dropping 3.5%, 15.21 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.5% higher by 47 cents a barrel. 31.98 right now, just below $32 on WTI. Recapping, rally underway on this Friday here with the S&P up 81 points, up 3.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser here with you. Justin Fox back with us, columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. He had a great piece we are featuring in our weekend show this weekend, very appropriately joining us. He did for that show via Skype, I believe, because it was all about working from home.
And that's where we find him.
And that's where we find him, working at home in New York City. Justin, great to have you back with us.
Great to be here, but not there.
Yeah, exactly.
You mean really great not to be here.
Yeah, exactly. You're making the right choice. So you have another piece in the magazine this week. You're a hardworking guy, as always. Help us understand the math that you did and sort of the approach you took. The headline sort of says it all. The most important coronavirus number is how many survive.
Well, this is something, and I wrote a piece for Bloomberg Opinion a week or so ago that this is kind of a condensation and update of, but it's just people are talking so much about what the survival rate is from this disease, and it varies. And right now, of the cases that the World Health Organization knows about, it's something like 3.5% of the people with confirmed cases have died, which is, it's really bad. It's not like getting smallpox or the Ebola virus, but it's a lot. But I think there's if you think about it as, okay, if you're a 30-year-old person, your risk is probably pretty low of dying. You're not going to die of this. And I think a lot of the commentary I've seen, although this has definitely been shifting over the last week, is people saying, why are we getting so freaked out about this thing that for most people there's a more than 99% chance of surviving, even if you get it. And the reason is simply, if you look at the flu pandemic of 1918, 99.3% of Americans did not die of the flu that year. And it was still the deadliest disease outbreak we've ever had in this country.
Right. It still has consequences, and it's still serious. And we can certainly see that happening. Yeah, I do think it's interesting. And I have to say, at home, we've been talking, too, about shouldn't we just, those who are most at risk, take them to kind of a safe place, if you will, get them out, because those are the ones that are most at risk of really having serious health complications or possibly dying.
Right. Take them to a safe place or let them stay at home and maybe bring things to them. And what it is with the rest of us and why all these events are being shut down and everything else is if you slowed, by the idea, which I talked about in the other piece for Business Week, is this idea of R naught, which is the sort of the contagiousness of the disease. One factor in it is how much contact people are having with each other. So all of these measures that are being taken are trying to reduce how many contacts people are having with one another, which then reduces the contagiousness of the disease. So that, I sort of feel like the whole world has come around to this, or not the whole world. I'm sure there's lots of people who are out there who are kind of puzzled by it, but definitely like in the New York area, in the San Francisco area, in the Boston area, it's being taken very seriously now that we need to do something to slow this down, because the other issue is that if all this happens at once and this spreads uncontrolled, what you get is our hospital system simply cannot care for all of the patients that would show up.
Yeah, I feel like all of us have sort of gone back to our statistics classes, and in terms of understanding, I was talking about this with my 17-year-old this morning, the idea of, flattening the curve in order to not, overly tax the medical system. And I was starting to explain it to him, and he's like, yeah, I understand math. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. He's 17. But truly this idea of changing human behavior and even sort of self-quarantining or just, sort of making the right choices. And yet then we turn to a story that crossed the Bloomberg not too long ago, and you may or may not have seen it, Justin, about, Disney fans like rushing to get to Disney World or Disneyland before they shut down. These are ultimately humans some of whom are not making good decisions, because Disneyland and Disney World are not closing just for fun. In fact, they are closing so that people don't show up. So there's no accounting for human behavior at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and I just think there's still a very wide array of how much thought people have given to this so far. And I feel like in people who are paying a lot of attention to the media, people who are on Twitter, people who live in, Seattle or Boston are getting to be kind of aware. But I think, and I will say, if in a lot of the country, I'm sure the risk is still a lot lower right now of running into somebody with coronavirus. Although I would think going to a place like Disney World, where people come from all over, there's sure to be somebody there who has it. You may not have any contact with them, but I just don't see how a full park at Disney World would not have a few people out there.
It's a law of big numbers at this point.
So Justin, what we talked about for our weekend show on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV is this whole idea, though, of working home. It's really simple. You're doing it. You've been doing it. I don't know. Is this something that ultimately catches on a little bit more going forward? I've had people tweeting at me and I've been working home for a long time. I get that. It's a little bit lonely, though.
Yeah, one thing that's been fascinating is my wife has been working at home for a while, and I have a much clearer idea of what she spends her day doing now, which is interesting. It's like, oh, wow, she has to talk to people on conference calls a lot. That's what most people have to do when they have to work at home. And, part of it is I have this ridiculous job where I could, as long as I have an internet connection and a computer, I can work anywhere. It doesn't matter. It's nice to go into an office and see people and have big computer screens and a really fast connection, but I don't need it at all.
Also,
I'm not doing a lot of video conferencing. What's that?
Also, the snacks, Justin, here at Bloomberg.
Well, and the snacks. That's true.
Well, but I love what you told us for the weekend show. Is you said, "Hey, I do have to think about though if I'm on Skype or Nexi and I'm talking to colleagues that make sure that it's not the liquor cabinet in the background, but maybe it's my library and my bookcases."
Yeah. Well, and I probably over the coming weeks will be spending some time setting up a better single home office setup because our son is coming home from college and it's going to get kind of crowded here. And lately, my wife and I have just been sort of trading different parts of the living room and family room. But I think need to.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point though, because I do think people are starting to adjust to thinking about this as maybe longer term and not just a few days here and there. Justin Fox, thank you so much. Bloomberg opinion columnist, a couple great stories in this special edition of Bloomberg Business Week. And coming up for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco and watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week is going to continue right here. If you're listening to us on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is next. We are going to hear from the president, we think, in the coming hour.
Well, we are watching a feed down there in Washington, the Rose Garden, and we do see reporters collecting and members of his team. And so we do anticipate at the top of the hour that we will hear from the president. This will be, a second attempt, I think, to calm some of the anxieties and concerns and fears, to be quite honest, that we've seen play out in the financial markets this week. No doubt about it. We're on track for the worst week for stocks since 2008. So there's a statistic for you. But stick around. Lots more to come, folks. And, of course, we will take you to Washington for the president. This is Bloomberg.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Friday. What a week it has been. We are awaiting remarks from President Trump. We will have those for you live right here on Bloomberg Radio. Checking markets, so stocks are climbing on optimism. Governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from the coronavirus fallout. S&P 500 index up 3.4% right now. It has been a volatile session, providing some respite after stock's worst day since 1987. The gauge bounced off lows after reports G7 governments would coordinate virus responses, and President Trump planned to declare a national emergency. Again, we'll have the president's remarks from the White House coming up shortly right here on Bloomberg Radio. So here's where we stand. The S&P up 91 points, up 3.7%. Dow Jones Industrial Average rallying 840 points, up by 4%. NASDAQ up 245 points. That is a gain there of 3.4%. So stocks are climbing on hopes governments will step up their response. Diane Swank is chief economist at Grant Thornton.
The world wants to see everybody dancing together. This is a tango. This isn't a single dance, a single person dance. This requires a partnership between fiscal and monetary policy, and they want to see also the federal government step up as other governments have, and it now looks like we're finally moving towards that. Can't be soon enough.
And right now we do have the 10-year yielding 0.94% among interest-sensitive stocks. J.P. Morgan Chase up 10.2% today. Citigroup rebounding by 10.2% as well. Bank of America up by 9.8%. Wells Fargo shares are up now by 8.7%. Just getting word from Norwegian Cruise Line, a trading halt there. It says that it will be stopping cruises for about a couple of weeks, suspending voyages until April 11th. That's across a number of its lines. Again, trading halt, but before that news came out, shares of Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings up by 16.5%. Recapping stocks higher, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. S&P up 99 points, up by 4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, as we await the president down in Washington, let's talk a little bit about the economics picture. With us, Katie Greifeld, Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter, and Bloomberg chief economist Carl Riccadonna.
We're going to talk about economics, but we do want to point out Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. The business world is convening at the Indiana Global Economic Summit, April 26th to 28th. Visit astatethatworks.com to join the conversation about the future of the global economy. Again, visit astatethatworks.com.
All right, want to start with our chief U.S. economist, Carl Riccadonna, joining us on the phone in New Jersey. What's the economic picture here? We're just trying to make sense of it as this week wraps up, Carl.
Because you know, you and I live in the same city. There's like a lockdown this weekend.
Well, there's a lot of lockdowns happening across the country and across the globe, and this causes a hard stop in economic activity. So, there's some notion that maybe there's pent-up demand. If you needed a new car and didn't get to buy it this month or this quarter, you'll probably be forced to buy it later on in the year. But a lot of activity is permanently impaired, and so we shouldn't think of this in the context of a hard stop followed by a V-shaped recovery and whatnot. We need an aggressive policy response, a multi-pronged response to really offset this hard stop. So step one, the Fed needs to keep the lights on in the financial sector, which means all of these repo operations and reserve management purchases need to continue to keep the Treasury market functioning smoothly. Beyond that, we need more accommodation from the Fed, and we need a massive fiscal stimulus, or else the hit to GDP, which is a hit to GDI or gross gross domestic income will have debilitating consequences for the economy.
All right, well, let's remind everybody we are awaiting comments from President Trump. We're just watching the Rose Garden, waiting for him to come out. We will take you there to the nation's capital as soon as he begins speaking. Katie Greifeld, come on in. Of course, our cross-asset reporter here at Bloomberg News. Those Treasury yields that Carl talks about, I mean, I've been watching them. I find it fascinating that they're going up. They were going up yesterday. We've got the 10-year now at 0.95. How do you read that? What does it tell you?
Well, the Treasury market has been a question mark all week. The 10-year yield is up about 44 basis points on the week, whereas the S&P 500 is down 13%. That is a very strange divergence. You don't see it a lot because you think of Treasuries as the ultimate safe haven asset, but that just really illustrates how little liquidity there is in the Treasury market right now. People have been unloading their Treasuries to try to raise cash, either to meet margin calls or redemptions. And as a result, you're seeing yields spike even as, the broader market picture is really shaky. There's still a lot of jitters out there. I know we're up today, but we'll see if that changes in the final hour. But again, Treasuries are the biggest, most liquid bond market out there, and people are, trying to sell anything with any semblance of liquidity to try to raise cash right now.
Well, and it did, Carl,
just a quick headline.
Yes.
The White House discussing letting airlines keep ticket tax receipts. So again, maybe this is some of what we're going to hear from President Trump targeting specific industries. Sorry.
And that tax element is something we've heard a lot about. Yeah. The president tweeting earlier again about payroll taxes, suggesting that they be suspended through the end of the year. We're not sure whether that made it into the final agreement. We don't know that much about the negotiations. We just know that they were fast and furious between Secretary Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So, Carl, I want to go back to you. The Fed obviously very much in focus here, and a lot of hopes being pinned on maybe some more actions. We've already had a lot from Jay Powell and his team. There is a Fed meeting, I believe, next Wednesday at a Fed decision. What's the Fed's role here?
Well, the Fed role, first of all, to prevent this kind of short-circuiting in the Treasury market that's pushing yields higher in a moment of strain. So liquidity provision is the first priority, because if you don't have functioning Treasury markets, then accommodative monetary policy, no matter how accommodative it is not making it into the real economy. But I want to go back to this notion of tax receipts. If we're talking about airline ticket taxes and stuff, this is small potatoes compared to what actually is needed. And I think the payroll tax holiday could be a very real effective solution, but this requires passage through Congress, so it could be a little bit delayed because Democrats are worried this could be used as a backdoor to defund Social Security. So there needs to be a pledge that we won't defund Social Security. And a payroll tax holiday starting April 1st is something my team is writing about, and that would be a quick way to deliver about $480 billion of stimulus to the economy, enough to move GDP by about 2 percentage points if we had a complete payroll tax holiday in Q2 and Q3.
So, Katie, help us understand. I mean, your team is looking across all the assets. That's why we call it the cross-asset team, naturally. As you guys are talking, I'm guessing a lot of virtual communication is going on, a lot of IB chats and messages and phone calls and Nexi meetings. What are folks saying sort of across the markets?
Well, especially today, the focus has been on this 3 p.m. press conference. Mm-hmm. Anything from Trump that would bring him closer in line with the tone coming from other countries and from, organizations like the WHO, I think would be a big positive for markets. And you can see it clearly in the stock market right now, since we have an idea that he's going to declare a national emergency. But I think a lot of it hinges on, whether or not he downplays the severity.
Right.
Because we'll see where we go in this speech. And a lot of people don't want to hold risk into the weekend. That's been the narrative of the last 2 months. It looks like we're going to break that trend, but we'll see what happens when the speech starts to hit the tape.
Right. We are waiting, and we expect any moment from now to take you to the Rose Garden at the White House to listen to President Trump. Hey, Carl, we did get a read on March consumer sentiment, University of Michigan sentiment. Is that number helpful at all to giving us some idea of what's going on in the psyche of consumers?
Carol, it showed sentiment moving in the wrong direction, but I was actually surprised at the resilience of sentiment. So I think it was too early of a snapshot in the month to really get on folks' radar screens. We might get a better read next week when we get these regional manufacturing surveys from both the New York Fed and the Philadelphia Fed. Those tell us about manufacturing conditions, but often in a moment of crisis and economic turning points, they really become a sentiment gauge. So if they're holding in next week, that would certainly be an encouraging sign, but I think most folks have the sense here that this is just a ticking time bomb until we start to see some real strain evident in the economic data. One of the first things I'll be focusing on is the weekly jobless claims numbers, because if the labor market is showing signs that conditions are starting to unravel, that would truly be a disturbing economic signal.
Kate, I want to ask you about one part of the market we haven't actually talked that much about this week, although we did have a key investor in this sector earlier in the week. It's actually our Bloomberg Business Week Extra podcast with Kathy Wood. ETFs, especially in the fixed income side, that's a lot of people have money there. How are they? What are they telling us about the market right now?
It's a fascinating story, and it's pretty nitty-gritty. But basically what's happening is the price of some of the biggest bond ETFs are falling well below the fund's net asset value, which is calculated from the value of the underlying bonds. And this goes back to just like the strained liquidity conditions in the bond market right now. You have kind of a mismatch where the ETF is trading more actively than the bonds themselves. So you're seeing kind of a dislocation between the actual vehicle and the actual asset. And you're seeing it across the bond spectrum, which is really breathtaking, in super safe assets such as treasuries as well as high yield corporates. No risk has been spared here.
Hey, one thing I want to ask you, I know Jason asked you about this upcoming Fed meeting, which will be next Wednesday. I mean, the Fed is running out of room for traditional tools, but I do wonder, are they going to be, one of the more important games in town for the U.S. and the U.S. economy?
Well, without a doubt, fiscal stimulus is the more important game.
Okay.
Certainly the Fed has to keep markets functioning, but fiscal stimulus is going to be key. That being said, the Fed certainly has more policy space than its peers in Japan and Europe, for instance. So they can cut interest rates to the zero bound. And then they can intervene through quantitative easing. And while critics of quantitative easing will say, well, Treasury yields are already low. If we look at our Bloomberg screens, we can see 10-year yields at about 0.95 as we speak. So how much will QE actually help? But QE is not just designed to impact Treasury yields. It also has other mechanisms, portfolio channels and credit intermediation, and also even foreign exchange rates and valuations there. So QE could still be an effective tool, and the Fed has a lot of ammunition in that capacity.
And we should remind everybody that G7 leaders are expected to hold a conference call on Monday. So when we talk about that coordinated effort, we might get more, certainly on the European front.
All right. Thank you both so much. Always enjoy catching up with you. Chief U.S. Economist Carl Riccadonna joining us on the phone from New Jersey. That's also where we find the Garden State. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Katie Greifeld, both giving us some really good context ahead of hearing from the president. Let's go to Washington now, not for the president quite yet, but to Nancy Lyons. She's got world and national headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. President Trump will be holding a news conference in just minutes. He's expected to declare a national emergency, which would free up additional money for cities and governments in order to weather the coronavirus outbreak. The House is preparing to vote today on a relief measure. They're calling it Families First. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the focus will be on testing and making them free for everyone who needs one, including the uninsured. She says we will make it through this.
Our nation, our great nation, has faced crises before, and every time, thanks to the courage and optimism, patriotism and perseverance of the American people, we have prevailed. Now, working together, we will once again prevail, and we will come out stronger than before.
The Families First Coronavirus Response Act also provides 2 weeks paid sick leave for those affected with the virus. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Nancy, thank you so much. Again, we are awaiting the president there in the Rose Garden, keeping an eye on that for you. In the meantime, let's get an update on the trade. It's a green day so far, still in that last hour of trading. Charlie Pellet is here with an update.
Hey, you're absolutely right. Let's find out what President Trump has to say. We've got 44 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell here with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all holding on to gains. S&P up now by 80 points, up by 3.2%. Dow Industrials up 734 points, higher by 3.5%. NASDAQ up 222 this Friday, up by 3.1%. So stocks are climbing on optimism. Governments and central banks will step up their efforts to protect the global economy from coronavirus fallout. S&P 500 index, as I mentioned, up now by 3.3%. It is, however, on track for a losing week. For the week, it is looking like a loss of just about 14% on the week. We've got the 10-year at 0.94%. Gold down now by 3.6%, $15.19 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude advancing by 1.8%, $32.07 a barrel. So again, recapping here, stocks higher, the Dow up 835 points, up 3.9%, S&P up 3.7%, NASDAQ up by 3.4%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week.
So we know, without a doubt, pretty obvious, the leisure industry getting slammed because of the coronavirus. As a whole, hotels, resorts, and cruise line stocks, man, they're down more than 50% this year. Let's look, though, specifically at the cruise line industry, which has been especially hard hit. James Hardiman is Managing Director of Equity Research and Leisure Analyst over at Wedbush Securities. He joins us on the phone from New York City. Are you working from home?
I am. And I'm actually in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. I think
okay.
that's
So you're in Cleveland.
Yep.
All right. Well, good to know. Good to know. We did see a headline cross. Charlie Pellet and I and Jason were talking about it earlier. I think was it one of the cruise lines stopping certain services. This industry is being hit so hard. I'm assuming, is it safe to say that once we get through this, they bounce back? Does everybody bounce back, or who's most vulnerable at having a tougher time getting through this?
Yeah, I mean, these are all the right questions to be asking. First of all, let's just get through the news that literally just hit 10 minutes ago. Norwegian did announce a voluntary suspension of all voyages between now and April 11th, so a month from now. I thought that that's been inevitable in some way, shape, or form, whether they did it or the government did it. It's unprecedented. It's history-making. It's massively impactful. But I think it's inevitable. I think the pressure will only grow from here for the other cruise lines to follow suit. Royal Caribbean, as we speak, has been halted. That stock has been halted. I think there's a good chance that they've got similar news to announce on that front.
And I'm going to say that it looks like one business journal saying that Royal Caribbean will lay off over 800 contractors. So, as you're right, there's going to be some news here.
Correct. I mean, that's not why it's halted.
No.
I think they're preparing for that. But I think the answer to your question is, I do think these companies will make it. But basically, the bet that people are making at this point is, if you're investing in cruise stocks, is to that very question. If these companies are able to sustain all of this, I think a year from now, they'll be worth double to triple. But the name of the game right now is capital preservation. And I think you're going to see a series of moves with that in mind. We've seen some of that earlier this week. Both Royal and Norwegian added, $500 to $700 million of additional dry powder in the form of revolvers. That's what this is all about right now.
And so,
and to be
go ahead, James.
I was going to say, to be clear, I think the likelihood of some sort of liquidity event for these companies is low. But it's not zero, and it's significantly higher than it was a week ago, a month ago, to start the year. Right. So what that percentage is, again, I think it's quite low, but it's how everybody, I think investors and certainly these companies are thinking about weathering the storm. I think this is going to last a long time. I think it's going to be until a vaccine comes out before people feel comfortable getting on cruises again in large numbers. And, you know, I don't think anybody expects that to happen for a year.
And I just want to point out Norwegian, which had been halted specifically, has resumed trading. Looks like it's up about 13% in today's session. So I just wanted to point that out.
And those stocks have been brutalized.
Yeah, Norwegian was up a little bit more than that. So it's off from before it was halted, but it's still up 11%.
Yeah.
I think people rightfully see that's the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It was up, 40% today? God, nuts.
So, James, talk to us about, if we can switch gears a little bit, the theme park business, because we were talking about some headlines earlier that both Disney World and Disneyland are set to be closed, although you have people still showing up apparently today to try and get those last rides in. That feels very significant, and obviously they're not the only theme parks in the game, but I would argue the most visible. How does this play through that sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be hugely impactful. Now, the good news for the good news for Disney World and Disneyland and Universal, for that matter, Universal theme parks, is that they're a small part of massively profitable companies, right? And so, you know, Disney has a lot of things that might benefit, you know, streaming, for example.
Right. Disney Plus is looking better and better right now, right?
Is looking better and better. And so, if you've got the balance sheet, this becomes a much easier decision. As I think about some of the pure plays, right? So SeaWorld, which also announced that they're going to be closing parks for a period of time. You know, they have a number of parks that are open right now. The good news for companies like Six Flags and Cedar Fair is that the vast majority of their parks are not open right now and aren't expected to open until April, in most cases May sometime. But again, if you think this is going to be you know, not a couple week thing, but a multi-month thing, maybe lasting much longer than that, I think you're going to see those companies do everything that they can to bolster their balance sheet and to have as much dry powder available to them as humanly possible.
Hey, James, let me just ask you, who in your universe that you cover within the cruise line industry, the theme parks and so on, are most vulnerable? Are there any names that you're worried about maybe considering downgrading because it's going to be tougher for them to come out on the other side because of the virus?
Yeah, I mean, cruise lines are clearly, if there's another industry on the planet that is more, you know, at risk to this, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Now, again, the good news is the three public cruise companies are big, you know, savvy, well-capitalized companies. Could there be smaller, you know, cruise operations that go under? Yeah, but those aren't public companies. Clearly, you know, we've hit on both of them. Cruise lines and theme parks, I think, are going to be the most in jeopardy here, and we'll just have to see from there.
All right.
I would say that. Go ahead.
All right, we're going to leave it there just as we await the president, James Hardiman, Managing Director of Equity Research and Leisure Analyst for Wedbush Securities, joining us on the phone from Cleveland.
I do want to mention some headlines that did cross while we were talking to James. Intel still continuing to operate on a relatively normal basis. They have recommended that their employees work from home, and they are still paying hourly workers in full. So we did have some headlines again, just crossing on Intel specifically. Just quick check on the share price. Intel shares, they are trading higher. They're up about 8.9%. 49.59 is the trade.
All right. Much more ahead. Awaiting the president. Dave Wilson's stock chart of the day, is next. This is Bloomberg.
Well, thanks, Dave, for that uplifting song.
Sorry, what can I say?
Is that Little Richard?
No, actually, it's the Jeff Beck Group.
Would not have
from back in the
that
60s. Absolutely. And what we're talking about here is what's happening to value stocks, you know, the ones that are cheap relative to earnings or sales or asset values. They've been going down in relative terms when you compare them with growth stocks. You know, the faster growing companies, when you look at those same yardsticks, especially sales and earnings. And there was a comparison made yesterday online by Andrew Thrasher at Thrasher Analytics that got my attention. He used exchange-traded funds. I went back to the indexes, but specifically what's called the S&P 500 Pure Value and Pure Growth Indexes. So what you're doing is you're taking the stocks out of the S&P 500 that best fit those categories. So it's not like all 500 stocks are in one or the other. They each have about 100 shares each. And what you find out is that the ratio between the two has really taken a tumble lately. So the weakness that we've seen in value stocks, really going back to when that bull market began in 2009, has intensified as the current bear market has gotten underway. So you saw this ratio drop 17% from the time the S&P 500 hit a record close on February 19th through yesterday. And it's barely higher today, even as stocks rebound. So it shows you that as much as things have changed, 11-year bull market turning into a bear market, what hasn't changed is that value stocks are still out of favor with investors. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email.
They just can't get a break.
They can't. But you can get the chart and the explanation that goes with it and everything I do going forward by sending an email to dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Never interrupt a man in his wrap-up.
I know.
How are people going to get the chart if they don't get Dave's email?
I gave him some time. He doesn't need a lot of time to do it.
Begrudgingly.
All right, Dave Wilson's going to come back a little bit later on with his stock of the day. I do have one question for you, though. What do you think investors at this point want to hear from the president? This is the second time we're going to get, what we would expect would be some big comments concerning what's going on in our universe, the investment universe, but of course, more importantly, what's going on with the virus. What do investors want to hear here?
How about something that's going to work?
Like what?
We can start there.
Well, what does that mean?
That'll work for the economy, that'll work to deal with the virus because, you think about what the Fed's done, the way they've thrown money at the banking system, the way that they brought down interest rates. That's great in terms of, making money cheaper, but it's not going to make people confident enough to fly on planes.
So if he came out and said, you know what, this week, everybody who wants a test can get a test. It's not going to cost you anything. You'll get tested. Would that do it?
That would be a help. But as far as the rest goes, it's really just a matter of people having confidence that the effort to combat the coronavirus is really being taken seriously and that there are efforts being made to deal with it on a national level that, are credible.
Yeah. Well, and presumably efforts being made that would give people the confidence that soon we will know the numbers or at least the trajectory, right? Like what that curve is going to look like.
What's the package? What's the government package going to be, right?
Well, and some way of saying, okay, we think it's going to top out at X
you're talking about the virus numbers.
Yeah, it's going to top out at X numbers.
Right.
We're going to sort of get back to something resembling normal life in X weeks or, God forbid, months. And then we know whether this is going to be, and Dave, I think you would agree with this, companies are going to say, okay, this is a 2-quarter issue. This is a 3-quarter issue. This is, as Bloomberg Businessweek said, a lost year.
Yeah.
That's it. One of the concerns for investors at this point is they don't know how it's going to play out, the whole issue of coronavirus when it comes to companies' results and how long it's going to be an issue. No question. How many times have we heard companies say that, we're not factoring the coronavirus into our numbers yet? So, once you get to the point where you can actually do that math, then at least people can feel comfortable with the risk they're taking that business will be down.
So Pfizer, a headline crossing, this is coming from Dow Jones, their plan at their company includes marshaling their people, including formation of SWAT team of virologists, biologists, and vaccine experts. That's the other side of this, right? That those who get sick, access to health care and having enough of the experts in place to take care of people who do become ill, but also those who can work on a solution here.
Right.
That's really important.
Right. All right. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. As Carol said, we will chat with you a little bit later on about your stock of the day. Just want to give you a sense of some of the headlines we are seeing here in the newsroom. We're looking at companies, coming out. On the one hand, as you mentioned, Intel, Carol, saying that it's going to encourage people to work from home. At the same time, we have Citigroup coming out and saying that one of their employees here in Manhattan has tested positive for coronavirus. I mean, these are the sorts of headlines I feel like we've been anticipating here.
We had a lot of them yesterday. I feel like the last couple of days, really this week, the momentum has been growing up as, about companies and areas of the world really shutting down. We do want to remind everybody that President Trump is expected to speak in a few minutes from the Rose Garden, and he is expected to make some announcement about fiscal stimulus and fiscal programs and programs to deal with the virus specifically, and hopefully something with testing. So we are anticipating something on that front. I will say that our live blog, I'm just watching it, is Arkatia Dmitrieva saying that key in the announcement will be the details of stimulus, and that even those who have been deficit hawks, they're dropping their calls for a balanced budget, because what we need to do is we're going to need to do some spending right now. It's crucial.
Well, and, this is going to be an interesting, maybe unexpected test, shall we say, of modern monetary theory, which essentially says deficits don't matter. We are seeing the president now approaching the podium. Let's head to Washington now and the president of the United States.
Beautiful day in the Rose Garden. Appreciate it. Beautiful day in the Rose Garden. Appreciate everybody being here. Today I'd like to provide an update to the American people on several decisive new actions we're taking in our very vigilant effort to combat and ultimately defeat the coronavirus. We've been working very hard on this. We've made tremendous progress. When you compare what we've done to other areas of the world, it's pretty incredible. A lot of that had to do with the early designation and the closing of the borders. And as you know, Europe was just designated as the hot spot right now, and we closed that border a while ago. So that was lucky, or through talent, or through luck, call it whatever you want. But through a very collective action and shared sacrifice, national determination, we will overcome the threat of the virus. I also announced Wednesday night, following the advice of our medical professionals, who are doing a tremendous job, and we appreciate it very much, that we're suspending the entry of foreign nationals who have been to Europe in the last 14 days from entering the United States. Citizens, permanent residents, and our families, any of the families returning from Europe, will be subject to extra screening as well as self-isolation for a period of 14 days. As the World Health Organization confirmed today, many of the things that what we said were 100% correct, including our designation before them of Europe. Like our earlier very aggressive actions with China, this measure will save countless lives. I appreciate a number of the folks behind me, number of the people behind me said that that saved a lot of lives, that early designation. But it is only the beginning of what we're really doing, and now we're in a different phase. We had some very old and obsolete rules that we had to live with. It worked under certain circumstances, but not under mass circumstances. They were there for a long time. They were in place for a long time, and we're breaking them down now. And they're very usable for certain instances, but not for this. To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency. Two very big words. The action I am taking will open up access to up to $50 billion of very important and a large amount of money for states and territories and localities in our shared fight against this disease. In furtherance of the order, I'm urging every state to set up emergency operation centers effective immediately. You're going to be hearing from some of the largest companies and greatest retailers and medical companies in the world. They're standing right behind me and inside of me. I'm also asking every hospital in this country to activate its emergency preparedness plan so that they can meet the needs of Americans everywhere. The hospitals are very engaged. New York and various other places are also very engaged. I just spoke with Governor Cuomo. We had a very good conversation, and we're working very strongly with many states, including New York. The emergency orders I'm issuing today will also confer broad new authority to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. The Secretary of HHS will be able to immediately waive provisions of applicable laws and regulations to give doctors, all hospitals, and healthcare providers maximum flexibility to respond to the virus and care for patients. This includes the following critical authorities: the ability to waive laws to enable telehealth, a fairly new and incredible thing that's happened in the not so distant past. I tell you, what they've done with telehealth is incredible. It gives remote doctors visits and hospital check-ins, the power to waive certain federal license requirements so that doctors from other states can provide services in states with the greatest need. Number two, the ability to waive requirements that critical access hospitals limit the number of beds to 25 and the length of stay to 96 hours. The ability to waive the requirements of a 3-day hospital stay prior to admission to a nursing home, big thing. The authority to waive the rules to hinder hospitals' ability to bring additional physicians on board or obtain needed office space. They can do as they want. They can do what they have to do. They know what they have to do. Now they don't have any problem getting it done. The authority to waive rules that severely restrict where hospitals can care for patients within the hospital itself, ensuring that the emergency capacity can be quickly established. We'll remove or eliminate every obstacle necessary to deliver our people the care that they need and that they're entitled to. No resource will be spared, nothing whatsoever. 10 days ago, I brought together the CEOs of commercial labs at the White House and directed them to immediately begin working on a solution to dramatically increase the availability of tests. Other countries have called us and worked with us, and they're doing similar things or will be doing similar things. As a result of that action today, we're announcing a new partnership with private sector to vastly increase and accelerate our capacity to test for the coronavirus. We want to make sure that those who need a test can get a test very safely, quickly, and conveniently, but we don't want people to take a test if we feel that they shouldn't be doing it. And we don't want everyone running out and taking, only if you have certain symptoms. Using federal emergency authorities, the FDA approved a new test for the virus. We did this within hours after receiving the application from Roche, a process that would normally take weeks. We therefore expect up to 500,000 additional tests will be available early next week. We'll be announcing locations probably on Sunday night. I want to thank Roche, great company, for their incredible work. I'd also like to thank Thermo Fisher. The FDA's goal is to hopefully authorize the application within 24 hours. It'll go very quickly. It's going very quickly, which will bring additionally 1.4 million tests on board next week and 5 million within a month. I doubt we'll need anywhere near that. At the same time, we've been in discussions with pharmacies and retailers to make drive-through tests available in the critical locations identified by public health professionals. The goal is for individuals to be able to drive up and be swabbed without having to leave your car. I want to thank Google. Google is helping to develop a website. It's going to be very quickly done, unlike websites of the past, to determine whether a test is warranted and to facilitate testing at a nearby convenient location. We have many, many locations behind us, by the way. We cover this country and large parts of the world, by the way. We're not going to be talking about the world right now, but we cover very, very strongly our country. Stores in virtually every location. Google has 1,700 engineers working on this right now. They've made tremendous progress. Our overriding goal is to stop the spread of the virus and to help all Americans who have been impacted by this. Again, we don't want everybody taking this test. It's totally unnecessary. And this will pass. This will pass through, and we're going to be even stronger for it. We've learned a lot. Tremendous amount has been learned. I want to thank Deborah Birx, and I want to ask her maybe to come up and say a few words as to what's happening. Dr. Birx is a highly respected person I've gotten to know very well over the last 6 days. And what we've done is rebuilt something that was very old-fashioned, somewhat obsolete, certainly obsolete when it comes to the kind of numbers that we're talking about. Dr. Birx, please. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I think you know at the beginning of this epidemic, HHS through CDC proactively developed an assay built on the existing flu surveillance system. That surveillance system was then converted to diagnostic system. But last Tuesday, seeing the spread of the virus around the globe, the President realized that our current approach to testing was inadequate to meet the needs of the American public. He asked for an entire overhaul of the testing approach. He immediately called the private sector laboratories to the White House, as noted, and charged them with developing a high-throughput quality platform that can meet the needs of the American public. We are grateful to LabCorp and Quest for taking up the charge immediately after the meeting, and within 72 hours, bringing additional testing access, particularly to the outbreak areas of Washington State and California, and now across the country. We are also very grateful to the universities and large hospital systems that took up the charge to develop their own quality tests, made available by new FDA guidance. This has resulted in expanded testing across New York, California, Washington, Colorado, and you see sometimes those drive-through options that have been made available through these high-throughput options. Following the meeting last week, major commercial laboratory equipment and diagnostic companies took immediate action to adopt and develop new testing systems. Last night, the initial company, Roche, received FDA approval, moving from request to development to approval in record time. This innovative approach centered fully on unleashing the power of the private sector, focusing on providing convenient testing to hundreds of thousands of Americans within short turnaround times. In less than 2 weeks together, we have developed a solution that we believe will meet the future testing needs of Americans. I understand how difficult this has been. I was part of the HIV/AIDS response in the 80s. We knew from first finding cases in 1981, it took us to almost 1985 to have a test. It took us another 11 years to have effective therapy. It is because of the lessons learned from that we were able to mobilize and bring those individuals that were key to the HIV response to this response. I understand that a lot of this behind-the-scenes action over the last couple of weeks was invisible to the press and the American people. But this intense effort has not only resulted in innovative solutions, but an automated high-throughput system bringing the availability of these quality coronavirus testing to the American people at unprecedented speed. Finally, I want you to know in South Korea, they did have a large number of tests available over the last several weeks. Their positivity rate is between 3% and 4%. With LabCorp and Quest expanded testing, their positivity rate is between 1% and 2%. So we want to also announce this new approach to testing, which will start in the screening website up here, facilitated by Google, where clients and patients and people of interest can go, fill out a screening questionnaire, move down for symptoms or risk factors, yes. They would move down this and be told where the drive-through options would be for them to receive this test. The labs will then move to the high-throughput automated machines to be able to provide results in 24 to 36 hours. That is the intent of this approach. We have seen it work just in our own United States, and we want to bring this across the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great. I'd like to maybe have Tony. Do you want to come up? You've become I think everybody out here knows you pretty well, but Tony has been doing a tremendous job working long hours, and you've seen a lot happen, but this has been, it's been a great experience, and working with you has been terrific. Tony, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is another example of what I've been referring to in my discussions with many of you in the audience as a proactive, leaning forward, aggressive, trying to stay ahead of the curve. And what you're seeing now with this order is that we're going to be able to remove the constraints so that people at the state, the local level, the individual physician, all the way up through the federal government will have as many constraints as possible removed for them to do everything they possibly can so that we can implement the things that we've been talking about. The containment, the mitigation, so that, as I've said many times, that curve that I refer to that goes up, we don't want to have that curve. We want to suppress it down to that small mound. And I think what we've done today is something that is going to be a very important element in having us be successful in doing that. We still have a long way to go. There will be many more cases, but we'll take care of that. And ultimately, as the president said, this will end. But what's going on here today is going to help it to end sooner than it would have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. If I could, some of these folks we know, they're celebrities in their own right. They're the biggest business people, the greatest retailers anywhere in the world, and one of them is Doug McMillan from Walmart. And I'd like to have Doug, if you would, say a few words, wherever you may be. Good, Doug, please.
When we got the call yesterday from the White House, we were eager to do our part to help serve the country. And given what we're facing, that's certainly important to do. We should all be doing that. So we've been asked to make portions of our parking lot available in select locations in the beginning and scaling over time as supply increases so that people can experience the drive-through experience that the president described. We'll stay involved and do everything we can from a supply chain point of view to be of assistance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it very much. I'll just stay right over here. And Richard, if you could come up, please. Richard, please. Walgreens, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And similar to Doug and Walmart, we're happy to stand in here and help in communities all across America, because a lot of times when we have natural disasters, our stores are a beacon in the community, and this situation is no different. So we look forward to partnering with the CDC, the administration, HHS, and the task force, and specifically to the vice president's doing such a fantastic job. We're ready to engage and help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you very much. Brian Cornell, Target. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, please.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for inviting us here today, along with our colleagues from Walmart and Walgreens and our partners at CVS. Normally, you'd view us as competitors, but today we're focused on a common competitor, and that's defeating the spread of the coronavirus. And we look forward to working with the administration to do our fair share to alleviate this growing threat. So thank you for including us today. In the near term, we're all committed to making sure we're keeping our stores open to serve the American consumer who's rapidly stocking up on household essentials, key food and beverage items that they need during this time, making sure we run safe stores and create an environment that's safe for our team members, making sure that they feel supported during this very critical time. So thank you for including us.
Thank you very much. Great job. Great job. Is Tom here? Tom Poland? Tom Paul, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. As CEO of Becton Dickinson, we're one of the leading providers of medical devices as well as collection products for testing of coronavirus. We're ramping up our manufacturing capacity to ensure that the right collection devices and testing equipment are ready to address this issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Tom. Great job you've done. Stephen Rakowski, Quest Diagnostics, please. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. So as mentioned, we were called with the leadership of the Vice President last week to come together as an industry. And we took advantage of that opportunity to work with the FDA, to work with the Center for Disease Control. And we are up and running with tests in a number of our facilities. As the President mentioned, we now have capabilities from Roche Diagnostics that we will bring into our facilities this weekend. And I know myself and us, my colleague at LabCorp, will be doing the same. So the capacity available to the American public to support this action with consumers will be considerably increased in the next few weeks. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. And Matt Sauce, please, of Roche. Matt, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. President. So from Roche, we want to thank the FDA for their rapid approval of our coronavirus test. We really appreciate the partnership with the CDC and the FDA to get that to market as fast as possible, because it's critical for us to make that available to help patients in need, and working with laboratories to get it up and going in the near future, which will bring hundreds of thousands of tests available to patients in need in the United States. So thank you.
And you can do it. You can do it. A great company. David Pierre of Signify Health, please.
And we go to the homes of the most vulnerable elderly, and through our network and our logistics engine, we stand ready to help and provide our clinicians to be where they're needed, whether they're in retail clinics or in the home, and we're here to assist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll be changing a lot of the rules, regulations for future, should this happen in the future, which we hope it never does. But it will, I guess, somewhere out there. There's some bad ones over the years, and I guess that'll continue to an extent. But we hope it never happens. But we're going to be changing a lot of the old rules and specifications and regulations. Adam Schechter, who's really been of tremendous help. LabCorp, please. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. President. At LabCorp, we're working every second of every day to increase the number of tests that we can run. We're working with academic medical centers, with our colleagues at Quest, with other hospital and other laboratories to ensure that we do everything we can to increase the testing as we move forward. And I can tell you we understand how important the testing is, and we are committed to doing everything possible.
Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you. Thomas Moriarty, CVS. We all know CVS. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have been focused since the start of making sure our patients and the customers we serve have the information they need, the safety they need as well. We are committed to working with the administration and local public health officials to make this work as well. And thank you, sir, for the honor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Great job. And Bruce Greenstein, LHC Group, tremendously talented people. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you for the honor of being here. And the home health industry has been treating patients and seniors in the safety and comfort of their own home for decades. We're very proud to be part of the equation for testing in their own home. For Americans that can't get to a test site or live in rural areas far away from a retail establishment, we're here to help and to partner with our hospitals and physicians, as well as the people we have here today that will be doing testing around the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good test.
Oh, we'll practice that.
Okay, I like that. That's good. Also announcing the following emergency executive actions today. To help our students and their families, I've waived interest in all student loans held by federal government agencies, and that will be until further notice. That's a big thing for a lot of students that are left in the middle right now. Many of those schools have been closed. Based on the price of oil, I've also instructed the Secretary of Energy to purchase, at a very good price, large quantities of crude oil for storage in the U.S. Strategic Reserve. We're going to fill it right up to the top, saving the American taxpayer billions and billions of dollars, helping our oil industry and making us even further toward that wonderful goal which we've achieved, which nobody thought was possible, of energy independence. It puts us in a position that's very strong, and we're buying it at the right price. And that's something that would have not even been possible a week ago. The price of oil went down quite a bit, so we're going to fill it up. It's a good time to fill it up. I'd like to ask Mike Pence to say a few words, please. VP.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is this day should be an inspiration to every American, because thanks to your leadership from early on, not only are we bringing a whole-of-government approach to confronting the coronavirus, we're bringing an all-of-America approach. Mr. President, from early on, you took decisive action. You suspended all travel from China. You created travel advisories, South Korea and Italy. We screened all travelers from all airports in both of those countries. And on the unanimous recommendation of your health experts, you, at midnight tonight, will effectively suspend all travel from Europe. And Americans that were returning will be screened and asked to voluntarily participate in a 14-day quarantine. Throughout this process, Mr. President, you've put the health of America first, but you brought the best of America to address it. And it's not just at the federal level. As you said, Mr. President, we've been working with states across the country. We issued broad guidelines from CDC for every American. But this week, at your direction, we tailored specific recommendations from CDC for New York, Washington State, California, Massachusetts, and Florida. And we've been in continuous contact, as you said, with governors around the country. And Mr. President, you have forged a seamless partnership with every state and every territory in this country to put the health of our nation first. But today, I trust that people around the country that are looking on at this extraordinary public and private partnership to address the issue of testing with particular inspiration. After you tapped me to lead the White House Corona Task Force, Mr. President, you said, this is all hands on deck. And you directed us to immediately reach out to the American business sector, commercial labs, to meet what we knew then would be the need for testing across the spectrum. And today, with this historic public-private partnership, we have laid the foundation to meet that need. For Americans looking on, by this Sunday evening, we'll be able to give specific guidance on when the website will be available. You can go to the website, as the President said. You'll type in your symptoms and be given direction whether or not a test is indicated. And then at the same website, you'll be directed to one of these incredible companies that are going to give a little bit of their parking lot so that people can come by and do a drive-by test. Mr. President, I want to join you in thanking Walmart and CVS and Target and Walgreens. These are companies that are synonymous with communities large and small, where people come together, and now they're going to come together to meet the needs of the American public. These commercial laboratories, LabCorp and Quest and Roche, have just done an incredible job stepping forward, and they're going to literally make hundreds of thousands of tests available and being processed with results to patients in the very near future. But it's all a result of you tasking us with bringing together not just government resources, which all state labs can now test across the country. CDC is testing. But you said, Mr. President, that we wanted to bring all the resources of the country together, and that's what this partnership really means. You know, the truth is that we have coronavirus cases now in 46 American states. And while the risk of serious illness of the coronavirus remains low, we want to encourage every American to practice common sense, practice good hygiene, go to the CDC's website to see what the guidance is for your community or for the American people broadly. And as the President has said, it's especially important now that we look after senior citizens with chronic underlying health conditions. Last week, the President directed the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services to raise the standards at our nursing homes, increase inspections at our nursing homes. And today we're offering very specific guidance, which Seema Verma will articulate about visitations at nursing homes. It's important to remember that they were there for us when we were growing up, Mr. President. They helped us with our homework. They tucked us in at night. They cheered us on as we pursued education, cheered us on in our careers, and now it's time for us to be there for them and to recognize that seniors with chronic health conditions are the most vulnerable, and Americans can make a difference. So wash your hands, use common sense, look after the most vulnerable. And Mr. President, I know I join you in saying that every American should be proud of this incredible public-private partnership that's going to be speeding access of testing to millions of Americans in the weeks ahead. And together, as you've said many times, together we'll get through this. Together we'll put the health of America first.
Thank you. Seema, where's Seema? I'd like you to maybe take that a step further, please, on nursing homes. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you to the President for the declaration. It allows my agency, CMS, that runs Medicare and Medicaid and has oversight of all of the nation's healthcare facilities, to suspend regulations that could get in the way of treating patients during this time. These temporary national blanket waivers are reserved for the rarest of circumstances, and they represent a massive mobilization of our country's resources to combat this terrible virus. And the flexibilities we are offering will be a godsend to the providers, clinicians, and facilities on the front lines of this fight. And later, CMS is going to be issuing guidance directing nursing homes to temporarily restrict all visitors and non-essential personnel, with a few exceptions such as end-of-life situations. We fully appreciate that this measure represents a severe trial for residents of nursing homes and those who love them, but we are doing what we must to protect our vulnerable elderly. Thank you.
As I said in my address to the nation the other night, all Americans have a role to play in defeating this virus. Our most effective weapon right now is to limit the damage to our people and our country and slow the spread of the virus itself. The choice we make, the precautions we put into place are critical to overcoming the virus, reducing its spread, and shortening the duration of the pandemic, which is what it is. The CDC has published guidelines on the coronavirus.gov to enable its coronavirus.gov, and it's very heavily used right now, I will say, to enable every American to respond to this epidemic and to protect themselves, their families, and their communities. While the risks to young and healthy Americans remains very low, we've learned a lot about this over the last 2 weeks. Anyone can be a carrier for the virus and risk transmission to older Americans and those with underlying health conditions and those who are most at risk. They have not done very well. Older Americans who are, especially if they have a health problem, they have not done well. We must take all precautions and be responsible for the actions that we take and that we see other people take. We want to prevent the spread and transmission of the disease. It's incredible what's happening with the sporting world, where so many of the great sports that we've gotten so used to at this time of the year, they're not going to be meeting, and they've done a great service, actually, but that would be another way that it could be, problems could be caused. But this is why I outlined on Wednesday night my administration's the fact that we've issued a requirement suspending all medically unnecessary visits to various places, but in particular nursing homes. We should all be working off the same playbook when it comes to protecting Americans. We have to. We need to be consistent in adopting measures to limit the spread of the virus. The virus is the same whether it's spreading in cities, towns, or rural communities. The tools and tactics for attacking it are similar no matter where you go. No matter where you go, you have some hot spots throughout the world right now that people would have never thought possible. And they're being very seriously affected. Key among these efforts are breaking chains of transmission between people. These measures have been adopted by many companies, universities, and schools. And we want to protect the safety and the health of their employees and their students. I encourage everyone to follow the guidelines we've issued by CDC and these common sense measures. A lot of it's common sense. For the areas where the virus is spreading, the CDC is advising communities to postpone large gatherings, postpone assemblies, social functions, and sporting events, stagger recess and lunch for schools that aren't canceled, limit in-person meetings, increase scheduled cleanings, and cancel work-sponsored travel, among numerous other steps that can be taken. Americans are the strongest and most resilient people on earth, and in the coming weeks, we will all have to make changes and sacrifices, but these short-term sacrifices will produce long-term gain. And again, I've said we're learning a lot for the future, and future problems like this, or worse, it could get worse. The next 8 weeks are critical. We can learn, and we will turn a corner on this virus. Some of the doctors say it will wash through, it will flow through, in interesting terms, and very accurate. I think you're going to find in a number of weeks it's going to be a very accurate term. In times of hardship, the true character of America always shines through. We live in the company of the greatest heroes and the most inspiring citizens anywhere in the world. We want to take care of our people. We want to draw on the strength of our history, draw on the strength of our people, and we will get through this all together. We will just get through it. So much progress has already been made. And frankly, the numbers, because of steps that have been taken, are at a level that a lot of people are surprised, especially when you compare them with other places with far smaller populations. The spirit and the will of our nation is unbreakable. We will defeat this threat when America is tested. America rises to the occasion. And to those families and citizens who are worried and concerned for themselves and their loved ones, I want you to know that your federal government will unleash every authority, resource, and tool at its disposal to safeguard the lives and health of our people. So we're with you every step of the way. No nation is more prepared or more equipped to face down this crisis. As you know, we are rated #1 in the world. We're also helping other nations. Many other nations, we're helping them a lot. And they're doing okay in some cases. In some cases, they're not doing well at all. But we're working with a lot of groups of people and a lot of other nations. With faith and heart and hope and love and determination, we will succeed, we will prevail, we will be very, very successful, and we'll learn for the future. Thank you all very much. If you have any questions, we can take some. Go ahead, John, please. And if you'd like to ask some of the folks up here, would be fine, please.
Sure. Mr. President, where are you with the House bill? Yesterday we talked to you in the Oval Office. You were opposed to it. What has happened since then, and what's the holdup on that?
Well, we just don't think they're giving enough. We don't think the Democrats are giving enough. We're negotiating. We thought we had something, but all of a sudden they didn't agree to certain things that they agreed to. So we could have something, but we don't think they're giving enough. They're not doing what's right for the country.
And if I could ask Dr. Fauci?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You just mentioned waiving interest for student loans. Yeah. You talked about buying oil from the SPR or adding to the SPR. What other specific targeted measures is your administration thinking about taking? The Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, said today that you're just in the second inning of things that you might be undergoing.
That's true. And we are looking at many different things, as you know. You know some of them. They've been written about very widely. But we're going to be releasing a paper in about 2 hours stating quite a few other steps, very important ones. Please go ahead.
What, sir, if you wouldn't mind?
Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I want to know if you are in contact with the Brazilian President Bolsonaro after a member of his delegation who was with you Saturday was tested positive. And also, I want to ask another question, if you let me. Senators Lindsey Graham and also Senator Rick Scott are self-isolating. Are you planning to take any kind of precautionary measure to protect you and also your staff who was there?
No,
with him?
We have no symptoms whatsoever, and we had a great meeting with the president of Brazil, Bolsonaro. Great guy, very tremendous. He's doing a fantastic job for Brazil, and as you know, he tested negative, meaning nothing wrong this morning, and we got that word too because we did have dinner with him. We were sitting next to each other for a long period of time.
But are you in contact with him over the coronavirus crisis?
We're talking about it country to country, but we did discuss if he had a problem. It was reported that he may have it, and he doesn't, fortunately.
So much, Mr. President. Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that? And when can you guarantee that every single American who needs a test will be able to have a test? What's the date of that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all because we were given a set of circumstances and we were given rules, regulations, and specifications from a different time. Wasn't meant for this kind of an event. with the kind of numbers that we're talking about. And what we've done is redesigned it very quickly with the help of the people behind me. And we're now in very, very strong shape. I think we'll be announcing, as I said, Sunday night. And this will start very quickly, and we'll have the ability to do in the millions over a very, very quick period of time. So no, and what we have done, and we are going to be leaving a very indelible print for the future in case something like this happens again. But it was and that's not the fault of anybody, and frankly, the old system worked very well for smaller numbers, much smaller numbers, but not for these kind of numbers. Tony, maybe you'd like to say something?
Will you have, yes, please, by Sunday night, will every American be able to get a test?
So just to reiterate what I said to many of you multiple times, it's a dissonance of a system. The system was not designed for what it was designed for. It worked very well. The CDC designed a good system. If you want to get the kind of blanket testing and availability that anybody can get it, or you could even do surveillance to find out what the penetrance is, you have to embrace the private sector. And this is exactly what you're seeing, because you can't do it without it. So when I said that, I meant the system was not designed for what we need. Now, looking forward, the system will take care of it.
Mr. President,
and
with
interestingly,
respect,
if you go back, please, if you go back to the swine flu, it was nothing like this. They didn't do testing like this, and actually they lost approximately 14,000 people, and they didn't do the testing. They started thinking about testing when it was far too late. What we've done, and one of the reasons I think people are respecting what we've done it very early. We've gotten it very early, and we've also kept a lot of people out.
Mr. President,
yes,
the
please,
last administration said that they had tested 1 million people at this point. You've been
well, ask them how they did with the swine flu. It was a disaster.
But with respect, you've been
next, please.
For 3 years,
Next, please. They had a very big failure with swine flu. A very big failure.
President, I want to ask you about the European travel ban that goes into effect at midnight tonight, and the exemption that you've offered to the UK. There are 17 countries that are in the so-called Schengen zone that have fewer coronavirus cases than the UK. And just in the past 24 hours, the UK has added 208 coronavirus cases to their total. Why do they, Mr. President, deserve an exemption? And would you consider adding them to this travel ban list?
Well, that was recommended to me by a group of professionals, and we are looking at it based on the new numbers that are coming out, and we may have to include them in the list of countries that we will you could say ban or whatever it is during this period of time. But yeah, the numbers have gone up fairly precipitously over the last 24 hours. So we may be adding that. And we may be adding a couple of others. And we may frankly start thinking about taking some off. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a correspondent with Hong Kong Phoenix TV. You have mentioned that the number in China has been decreasing. China has made tremendous progress in the past weeks.
Sure.
I'm wondering how much confidence does this give you to control the virus in the United States? And do you see the data China has been sharing with the United States has been helpful?
I think it has been helpful. We've been working very much with China. I've spoken, as you know, with President Xi. They went through hell, and their numbers are starting to look very good. They're really looking very good. We're very happy about that. We are sharing data, yes. In fact, we're sharing quite a bit of data, including the fact that some of our pharmaceutical companies are working over there right now with large groups of people. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau yesterday.
Yes.
Did you discuss the potential closing of the border between Canada and the U.S.? And by extension, are you considering ways to salvage the $2 billion daily trade between the two countries?
So we didn't discuss the border. We've had a very good relationship, just about finished with the USMCA, as you know. He called me to tell me that. I think that was the primary reason for the call. At the time, his wife had not been diagnosed, and she's a lovely lady, wonderful lady, great lady. And since then, I've read that the result was that she has it. And I was a little surprised. I think he was surprised also. We did discuss it prior to. She's going to be fine, but he thought that she would not most likely have the virus. Unfortunately, she does.
Just hit their
but we
limit
didn't discuss the border yesterday.
So what happens to the limit of
Go ahead, please. if you have any questions for these great geniuses up here, you should, even a business question related to what we're talking about.
Mr. President, Ross Palumbo from ABC News Miami. As a relatively new Floridian, what is your message today to the cruise line industry and the travel industry that Florida depends upon? And since Senator Rick Scott and Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez have the same exposure as you and they are self-isolating, what's your message to them that they shouldn't be?
Well, I don't know that I had exposure, but I don't have any of the symptoms. And we do have a White House doctor, and I should say many White House doctors, frankly. And I asked them that same question, and they said, you don't have any symptoms whatsoever. And we don't want people without symptoms to go and do the test. The test is not insignificant. As far as the cruise line business, we're with them all the way. It's a great business. It's a great U.S. business, frankly. And I know how important they are to the country. That includes airlines, but the cruise line business obviously was hit very hard. We had a tremendous success out in Oakland where we moved it. Vice President Pence did a fantastic job with that. We worked with UK. We worked with Canada. They took their people back in Canada. It was approximately 600 people. UK likewise took a large number of people back to the United Kingdom. And we have people quarantined. It was a big operation, and it worked out really, you don't hear about it anymore. It worked out really well. Mike, you may even want to say something about that, because that was really done properly.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And that program with the Grand Princess, the ship, is continuing to be administered in the highest standards, orderly way, as the President directed. And Americans that needed treatment have received them. I spoke to the governor of Iowa today, and some of those who now have been cleared are able, in proper supervision, to be returning to Iowa. They're making arrangements for them to do that. Others in Texas, others in Georgia. Again, it's another example of the extraordinary cooperation. Governor Abbott, Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia. But to add to that, the President directed me last Saturday to travel down to Miami. We met with all the leaders of the cruise line industry. Several cruise lines have announced a 60-day pause in operations. Our Department of Homeland Security has praised them for doing that because of the unique health challenges, particularly presented to seniors with underlying conditions. We have a proposal from the cruise line industry, but they're currently considering what other steps that they might take, perhaps even similar to what those other lines have taken. We're anticipating some response on that in the next 24 hours. But as the President said, the American people cherish our cruise line industry, men and women who work on the ships, men and women who work on the shore, all the economies that are so benefited by a vibrant cruise line industry. And what the President's directed us to do is whether there is a pause in the moment, as some cruise lines are doing, and as we all continue to discuss, we want to work with the cruise line industry to ensure that when we come through this, that cruise lines and the medical services that are available and for the passengers and all of the crew, that cruise lines are safer than ever before and can prosper for many years to come.
Go ahead, please.
This question is for Doctors Fauci and Birx. Dr. Fauci, based on what you currently know, what is the trajectory for when this outbreak will peak? How long will the American people have to remain on this emergency footing? And for Dr. Birx, as the administration tries to get its arms around this test kit shortage issue, the next glaring need could be respirators and related hospital equipment. So what is the administration doing right now to ramp up production of respirators and that kind of equipment should this outbreak persist?
So when you have an outbreak like this, particularly if you're trying to interfere with it, it's really impossible to predict the time element of when it's going to peak and when it's naturally going to go down. So if you look at the situation where countries really did not get to the point of trying to contain and mitigate very well, you see a peak over several weeks and then down again over other several weeks. What we're trying to do with the efforts that we're doing is to blunt that peak. And I mentioned it many times, and I think it's important and appropriate for me to mention it again because it answers your question. When you talk about preventing infections from without in, which is the kind of travel restrictions we're talking about. Then how do you handle what you already have in your country? You continue some sort of containment, but you also do mitigation, and you try to proportion it to the areas where there are the most infections. The success of that and how much you make this turn into this is going to give you the amount of time. If we're successful, it'll be less. If we're not successful, it's going to be more. But these kind of things generally run out in a few months. Hopefully, we'll make it several weeks, 8, 9, whatever weeks. But I can't give you a number because it depends on how successful we are.
Great, thank you. It's a great question, and Dr. Fauci and I have worked together a very long time and continue. It's a privilege to work with him every day. So I think you can learn and I appreciate there were some graphics done by some of the reporting over the last several days. If you align the data from China with the data with South Korea, you can start to see almost a complete overlay of that data. And so that's what we're tracking very closely, as well as Italy. But you have an excellent question. I just want to make one note. In South Korea, I want to repeat, only 4% of the tests were positive. That means 96% of the people had a different respiratory disease, because we're in the middle of flu season, cold season, and all of the other respiratory diseases that we get every day. In LabCorp and Quest early data, they're running about 1 to 2% positive. That means that we have a lot more other respiratory disease out there besides the coronavirus, and that's why the screening is critical. But even with the screening, we're going to run what we think are very low rates. Needless to say, though, we're taking it extraordinarily seriously to plan for what could come. Not what Dr. Fauci talked about, blunting the curve. That makes it much less high need at that peak of the curve that we're all planning for. So we're in full inventory of all of our assets by the president unlocking and this emergency order and the secretary of HHS's ability. It unlocks all of those stockpiles, those needs, what the VA has, what the DOD has, what the National Guard has, and what every hospital has. And the hospital emergency preparedness plan allows them to defer elective issues to keep those hospital beds open for those who might need it. So we're in full planning mode for each of those things.
And I might add that we are in the process, and in some cases have already done it, ordered a large number of respirators just in case. We hope we don't need them, but we've ordered a large number. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In your speech to the nation, you mentioned the situation in China and South Korea have improved, and you're thinking about remove the restrictions, also the warning in place right now. When can we expect that announcement, and how do you see the overall progress that Asian countries made?
Well, some are making progress, some are not, as you know, but some are making progress. And as they make progress, as they get down to the number that we all think is right, that they know is right, we know is right, we'll be opening it up. And some are really moving along rapidly. We hope to be able to open things up as quickly as possible. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
President, I'd like to ask Secretary Azar and Dr. Fauci just how Dr. Fauci, okay?
Right, better. Not 100%, but 90%.
Right.
Go ahead.
This affects the elderly primarily, and in that sense, it's an unusual disease. Is any specific research being done as to why it affects our senior citizens more than others?
So I don't mean to diminish your question, but we already know why it would affect senior citizens more. Because when you talk about anything that requires a robust immune system, as you get older, your immune system is not as potent as it is when you were young. And that's the reason why when you talk about even influenza, which we have extraordinary experience with over decades and decades, the people who are very vulnerable are the elderly and those with underlying conditions. The same thing holds true for a variety of other disease. Why cancer is more prevalent in mostly in older individuals, because the immune system that screens for it is less robust. So it really is something that is kind of well known over a lot of studies.
Okay. OAN, please. OAN.
Mr. President, the Chinese officials are expressing some tones of discontent with where the source of this virus has come from, and they're spinning some odd narratives. What are your response to the Chinese officials who are doing that? And have they signaled any kind of resistance to upcoming trade talks in response to how we're handling this
virus? No, we have our deal with China. They're going to be buying $250 billion worth of goods and $50 billion from our farmers, and it's a great deal for our country. It's about time somebody did that. And frankly, phase 2 will start negotiating. I did read one article, but I don't think that article was representative, certainly not of my conversations with President Xi. And they know where it came from. We all know where it came from.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yamiche Alcindor from PBS NewsHour. My first question is, you said that you don't take responsibility, but you did disband the White House Pandemic Office, and the officials that were working in that office left this administration abruptly. So what responsibility do you take to that? And the officials that worked in that office said that the White House lost valuable time because that office wasn't disbanded. What do you make of that?
Well, I just think it's a nasty question, because what we've done is, and Tony has said numerous times that we've saved thousands of lives because of the quick closing. And when you say me, I didn't do it. We have a group of people. I could ask perhaps my administration, but I could perhaps ask Tony about that, because I don't know anything about it. I mean, you say we did that. I don't know anything about it.
You don't know
about the
reorganization that happened at the National Security
It's the administration.
Council.
Perhaps they do that. You know, people let people go. You used to be with a different newspaper than you are now. You know, things like that happen.
But this was an
Please go ahead. We're doing a great job. Let me tell you, these professionals behind me and these great, incredible doctors and business people, the best in the world, and I can say that, whether it's retailers or labs or anything you want to say, these are the best in the world. We're doing a great job. We have 40 people right now, 40. Compare that with other countries that have many, many times that amount. And one of the reasons we have 40 and others have, and again, that number's going up, just so you understand. And a number of cases, which are very small, relatively speaking, it's going up. But we've done a great job because we acted quickly, we acted early. And there's nothing we could have done that was better than closing our borders to highly infected areas. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vanessa Yaklish for NTN24 for all Latin American countries, and also for Spain, La Razón and Antena 3. I would like to ask you two very brief questions. One, for how long we're going to have the emergency, the national emergency?
I hope not long, but it's there now, and it gives tremendous powers for things that we need. Tremendous power, actually. And the Stafford Act and various other things that we're involved with and have studied and memorized in so many different ways and forms, it gives the kind of power that we need to get rid of this virus. And we're going to do it very quickly. And I hope we won't need it very long, but whatever it takes.
So for now, we still don't know for how long. And something very important I wanted to ask you is, like, how do you really think it's essential coordinating with other countries and learning from the lessons that they already suffer, the same situation, countries, of course, like China and South Korea, but now recently Italy and Spain.
Well,
and how is that coordination done?
Italy
Thank you so much,
we're in touch with Italy, and it's a country that we love. We have tremendous millions and millions of people, origins from Italy, and we're working with them. They're in probably, relatively speaking, the toughest position of all. We're in touch with everybody. We're in touch with, when I say everybody, we're in touch with many of the countries that you know about, that you're writing about, and they're calling us asking for advice. They're asking for the advice of the people behind me. Italy's got a tough situation, but they're really they have really clamped down. I think they're going to see some very good results. It's tough what they did. They really took their medicine, but they're going to see some much better results. Yeah, Jeff?
Thank you, sir. With regard to domestic travel, should Americans feel safe, or should Americans at all be traveling to states such as Washington State, New York, and other hotspots within this country? And a follow-up on Brazil. You're asking people who come back from Europe, Americans who are coming back from Europe, to self-quarantine for a couple weeks. You were in a picture with somebody who now has coronavirus from Brazil at Mar-a-Lago. How is that different?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I'm not coming back from someplace.
But you were exposed.
There was somebody that they say has it. I have no idea who he is, but I take pictures and it lasts for literally seconds. I don't know the gentleman that we're talking about. I have no idea who he is. I haven't seen the picture. I said there's a picture of somebody, but I take sometimes hundreds of pictures a day. And that night I was taking hundreds of pictures, so I just don't know. Now, I did sit with the president for probably 2 hours, but he's tested negative, so that's good.
It's just a matter
Please
of...
go ahead.
And the domestic...
Go ahead, please. I would say if you stay home, it's not bad. It's not bad. Now, there are certain parts of the country that are essentially have zero problem. Washington's been very tough, in particular a nursing home. And Washington, the state of Washington has been very tough. It's been a big percentage of, when you talk about the 40 deaths, it's been a big percentage of the deaths, as you know very well. And they all came from a certain area, unfortunately. Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Mr. President. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News. You talked this week about the UK doing a good job in tackling coronavirus. In light of the rise in cases, are you changing your mind about that? You also just spoke about possible travel restrictions. Have you discussed when they might be put in place?
Well, in light of the results, as we discussed before, in light of the results, we're going to be looking at it. And I know the task force is looking at it very strongly. Vice President, everybody. It was looking good, but the results have been building up pretty rapidly. So we'll be taking another look at that. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, thank you. I want to first follow up on Jeff's question, because the person you were standing next to, whether you know who he is or not, tested positive for coronavirus. Dr. Fauci said this morning, if you stand next to somebody who tested positive, you should self-isolate and get a test. You say your White House doctor is telling you something different. Who should Americans listen to? And my second question
I think they have to listen to their doctors. And I think they shouldn't be jumping to get the test unless it's necessary. But I think they have to listen to their doctors. And I mean, I don't know I haven't seen the picture. Somebody said there's a picture with somebody taking a picture with me, but I haven't seen it.
Well, doctors have
but
said you might have it even if you don't have symptoms. Are you being selfish by not getting tested and potentially
Well, I didn't say I wasn't going to be tested.
Are you going to be?
Most likely, yeah. Most
When do you
likely.
think
Not for
that'll
that
happen?
reason, but because I think I will do it anyway.
Will you let us know
fairly
the
soon?
results?
We're working on that. We're working out a schedule.
My second question, Mr.
You go
President,
ahead,
that was
please.
a follow-up.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of talk about testing. I just want to make sure we're clear, though, because we've been hearing from doctors who say, as of today, they still can't get patients tested who need a test. So as of today, can everyone who a doctor wants to have tested get tested? And if not, when?
Well,
when
that's
will
been
doctors
true for a
do it?
while, but I'll let Mike. Why don't you answer that, Mike, please?
Well, as the president said, and Dr. Fauci has articulated, the nature of our current system, where the CDC has samples sent and tests are performed, or state labs perform tests, or in some cases university and hospital labs perform tests, is generally adequate for an infectious disease or for people getting a diagnostic work done. But given the sheer scale of this, the president tasked us with bringing together this extraordinary public and private partnership. Today, by some estimates, when you add all the labs together, and today the president made it possible for every state in the country and their state labs to authorize labs across their state to do coronavirus testing. We're estimating somewhere between 15 and 20,000 tests a day are able to be performed. But very soon, with the program that was announced today, Americans will be able to visit one of the sites closest to them, as described on the website, if they're symptomatic, if the questionnaire indicates it, be able to have a test there, and these incredible companies will process the test and they'll receive that information. But for now, the best advice that we can give for people is to speak to their doctor, as the president just said, And if the doctor indicates that physician, if it's not a university hospital or otherwise authorized lab, can contact the state lab. Again, every state lab in the country can perform tests today. But what the president charged us with when I was tasked to take over the White House Coronavirus Task Force was open up tests all across the country. The president said a few days ago that we made it clear that any American that wanted to get a test would be able clinically to get a test. Because I literally heard from the governor of Washington State who said the doctors in Washington State were saying that if you were only mildly symptomatic, they would not order a test. And fortunately, the president directed CDC to clarify that. Now, anyone in consultation with their physician, regardless of their symptoms, can request a test. And their doctors will contact those agencies, those labs in their state. But very soon, Americans will be able to go to these drive-in sites and be able to obtain and participate in a test. Dr. Birx, is there more to amplify that?
No, I think that's perfectly said. I think just to review once more time about the testing. With LabCorp and Quest, I think many of you have been to doctor's office and seen the little boxes outside. What they do is they deliver both the specimen collection piece, because remember, it's a nasal swab. It's not a tube of blood. So they've delivered that to doctors' offices and hospitals, and then they will arrange to pick that up. The important piece in this all is they've gone from a machine that may have a lower throughput to the potential to have automated extraction. I know you don't want all these details, but it's really key for the laboratory people. It's an automated extraction of the RNA that then runs in an automated way on the machine with no one touching it, and the result comes out of the other end. So sample to machine to results. That cuts out a lot of the manual pieces that were happening that were delaying the test results.
And so with that, what's the timeline like from when you're tested to when you get results? Like next week, what should people expect?
Well, with the prior testing, it was taking several days because the test is slower. We believe with this test, because of its throughput, that the testing can be from start. Remember, it has to transport to the laboratory that will run it. And then we're hoping that all can be finished within 24 hours, which is very similar to other tests that you received today. These are not point-of-care tests. We are working on point-of-care tests, but we have to realize point-of-care tests take 6 months or more to develop. So we're not waiting for those. We're still diagnosing this on nucleic acid. So it's an antibody. This is actually the antigen, the actual virus in your nose that we're amplifying.
I think you have to remember, though, we're working very closely with states, and so you have a smaller form and more targeted form of government going in and doing it, like in New York, where the relationship is very good, like Gavin Newsom, where he made some very complimentary, that's California, he made some really complimentary comments the other day about how we're working together. We worked on the ship together, but we worked on a lot of other things together having to do with this. And we'll really, the relationship that we have, I can't think of a bad relationship. We're helping them. We're funding them in some cases, depending on what it is you're talking about. And we're all working together very closely. So we've done really, I think, a tremendous job of teamwork with the different states. All right, one or two more. And if you have questions for these folks, does anybody have a question for the folks up here? Who has a question up here? You have? Okay, go ahead. If you have a question, go ahead.
Thank you. I have one for you as well.
I thought. I know.
No, but I do have one for them because I haven't heard this yet.
I was waiting for that. Go ahead.
Because I haven't heard this yet.
Ask them first, please.
Yes, I will. Okay, with regards to the CEOs, can you please tell us when you expect to see items like hand sanitizer that have been going out of stock very quickly back on the shelves? There have been a lot of reports about that. And for you, Mr. President, could you talk about a potential bailout for the cruise industry? You had suggested that could happen. Is that something you're still looking at, and how much would that be?
Well, I didn't suggest that it could happen, but I can tell you it's an industry that was very badly impacted by what's going on with the virus. And it's a great industry. It's a very important industry, and we will be helping them, and we will be helping the airline industry if we have to, assuming we have to. So far, people haven't been asking, but if they should be asking, we want to make sure our airline is very strong. And then one day, all of a sudden, wasn't looking so good. Interestingly, I was talking to Doug, and the numbers they're doing from the retailing standpoint, I guess because of this, your business is like the opposite. All of you you've been selling a lot of stuff. Do you want to answer the question as to the hand sanitizers?
Sure. Yeah, specifically, the areas where we're seeing pressure in the supply chain are surface cleaners, cleaning supplies, paper goods in particular. Hand sanitizer is going to be very difficult to have 100% in stock on for some time. We're still replenishing it and shipping it, but as soon as it hits the stores, it's going. The same thing's true for the categories I just mentioned. So all the retailers will be working hand in hand with the suppliers to bring that to the market as fast as we can.
What is your advice, though, for Americans who are seeking those items? What is your advice? They're selling out online. They're selling out in the stores.
I think this team has given you other examples of what people can do to fight back against this virus, and you should look at the entire list.
Dr. Fauci,
please
speak to that. It'd be good.
I mean, obviously it sounds very simplistic, but wash your hands as often as you possibly can. And I know you're not always in a position to be able to wash your hands, but wash them as much as you can. If you don't have the alcohol wipes, try and get them. If you can't get them, just try as best as possible to do it. I mean, you got to do the best you can.
Well, just general preparedness. You want to wash your hands. You want to keep distance from people. And if you're around someone sick, keep away from them. This is basic public health. Now, these guys are selling a lot of toilet paper. I don't know. Tony, do you need to give some guidance that toilet paper is not an effective protection against getting the coronavirus? They're selling out. But the soap and water, hot water, soap, 20 seconds. That's how you do it.
Okay, one more. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, over here, behind you. Behind you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You have a great team, of course.
That's true.
My question is, Mr. President, are you happy from the Chinese response? What correctly really told you what really happened those days? And second, Prime Minister Modi or India have closed borders until April 15th, if you have spoken with the Prime Minister of India and if they have needed any help. And finally, sir, any message for the small businesses because they are losing some businesses because of this? Thank you, sir.
Well, on small businesses, the Small Business Administration is now stacked with money to help them, and we're going to make the money readily available if they need it, small businesses. We had a great time in India. It was an incredible 2 days, and he's a great friend of mine, and he's a friend of his people because he was greeted incredibly warmly, as was I, in that stadium. It was an incredible event, and I loved being with him, so just say hello to him. But we talked about everything. We talked about far more than just borders. And as far as President Xi, likewise, he's a friend of mine. I believe that we are dealing in good faith. We just worked, as you know, and as I just said, we just worked an incredible deal, big deal, one of the biggest deals ever made of any kind. Big even by the standards of some of the people here, the deal with China. But I think that they want to get to the bottom of things also. We're working, our drug companies, our pharmaceutical companies are working very closely with China and with India, as you know, and with all over the world. And they're all over the world. These are magnificent companies that are very, very knowledgeable. And we're very lucky to have them because I think you're going to come up with, whether it's therapeutic or whether it's just help in getting better, and then ultimately a vaccine, which takes a little bit longer because of the test periods and a couple of other reasons. You're going to have it very quickly because of the great knowledge, and they'll have it very quickly. They've made a tremendous amount of progress. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And you have been listening to the President of the United States there in the Rose Garden. And Carol, I have to say, from a pure market perspective, if the president wanted to undo some of the damage that was clearly done after his address to the nation the other night, mission accomplished.
Well, check it out. Just look at the markets, because we did finish at our highs of the session. And as the press conference went on, and especially as it got into testing measures and the access to tests and all of that, you did see the market shoot up. So let me just throw out the numbers for you, everybody. S&P 500 at its highs of the day, 9.3% higher, up 230 points. 2711 was the close, 2711 on the S&P 500. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 1985, so 1,985 points, closing at 23,185. It too was up 9.4%. NASDAQ up almost it was up 9.3%, up 673 points. Here's another thing. We've been watching the Treasury markets, 10-year yield rising to 1%. That's the highest that we've seen since March 5th. As for the S&P 500, that rebound, biggest gain since October of 2008. So a lot of momentum as that speech began. We said it began around 3:30-ish or so, went on for about an hour, a little bit more than that. And so, this is something we've talked about, especially as earlier in the week, all of the big banks, CEOs were meeting with the president. They came out and said this is not a financial crisis, and we understood it. It's been a health crisis, and individual citizens of this country wanted to know, okay, so what are we doing on a health level to deal with it?
Well, and to that point, the optics were just completely different. And really, this was a press conference that was cast completely differently. To your point, we're talking about the CEOs of Walmart, Walgreens, Target, Roche, LabCorp, and a number of others.
Becton Dickinson, Best Diagnostics, Signify Health, as you said. So it's everybody. This is our healthcare community and our health community, and they're saying we're on it, and we're going to have the tests, you're going to have access, you're going to get what you need. And so I really do think this is what the American public wanted. It's certainly what investors wanted. Let's go to Sean Donnan. He covers trade, globalization, so much more from Washington. So Sean, your thoughts on this event?
Well, I think it's a lot like you've been saying. Remarkable change in tone there from the president, really focused on the health response. I think what we've seen from him in the past or in recent days is a focus on the market reaction, almost an effort to try and talk up the markets. Here he seemed to ignore the markets and just focus on the health response and not talk much about an economic policy response. And that's something we're going to be coming to in the next few days. The one glimpse that we had about economic policy, really beyond the announcement of a big purchase for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, was a glimpse at still the tensions with Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, over an economic package there. And that is something that's going to run through the weekend. That's something that may still concern the markets when they come back on Monday.
Well, and I'm really glad you brought that up, Sean, because, we had a pretty, quick, maybe even someone described it as terse statement from the House Speaker a little bit earlier. We know, based on, yours and your colleagues reporting down there in Washington, she's been back and forth with Steven Mnuchin. They've talked at least 10 times today. It sounds like some heavy negotiations going on there. Do you have a sense of what the key elements of that are?
So I think that's the big thing hanging over here, hanging over this. We don't yet know what the big centerpiece of the congressional package or the stimulus package is going to be. We know the president.
All right, hang on a second, Sean. Hang on a second.
Hang on one second. We're just trying to clear a line here. A little bit of a technical issue going on here. It's a busy day. All right, Sean Donnan, back to you. Help us understand the points that are being negotiated between Pelosi and Mnuchin.
Sure, absolutely. So the Democrats have focused very much on help for affected industries, but also help for affected workers. Issues like paid sick leave, getting that out there. That's real social safety net stuff. The president has looked at a dramatic, or he's been pushing all week, a dramatic cut in the payroll tax. That could cost up to $1 trillion. That would be a big stimulus. But even some people within the White House don't think that would hit the right targets. In other words, it would hit people who are still working rather than people who are out of work, and to be crude about it. And some Republicans up on the Hill don't like that idea as well. So there's still some debates over what really is going to be the centerpiece of the economic response. We know that the president has been very focused on pushing the Fed to cut more. We'll hear from the Fed next week there, but we're still waiting for that big fiscal package.
Well, and I think what's interesting, too, is that, to be fair, we didn't necessarily have the playbook on a health crisis in this country, right? We've dealt with financial crisis, we've dealt with energy shocks, we've dealt with, a lot of other issues, and we've had, the swine flu was certainly a big impact, but I don't necessarily feel like it was on this magnitude, and maybe we got ourselves around it, certainly from the WHO and from the government, a lot faster. But I do think there's going to be several layers to this, Sean, right? And I do think you needed to kind of quell the health concerns and the hysteria over that. And then you've got to start quickly thinking about these people who are going to be at home and don't have a financial safety net, or they're not going to be paid if they're not going to work. And so that, as you said, what we deal with Nancy Pelosi in Congress, that's got to be the next step here. And some of those troubled industries, which he talked about, he said specifically, will help the cruise industry and the airline industry if we have to. He said they haven't been asking, but we'll have to see what we see along those lines as well.
Yeah, no, and we were reporting earlier today that, in fact, the airline industry has been having some conversations with the White House about some possible bailout options, and it looks like some of that would be focused on at least allowing airlines to keep the tax that is now charged on airline tickets. How effective that will be is, of course, unclear, given the problem being that really people aren't buying tickets, so then they're not paying that tax. But look, what we're looking at in the economy here, and again, this is above all a public health crisis, but the response to it is clearly going to come at an economic cost. And we're all working from home, or a lot of us are. We're not going to the mall. We're not going to the movie theater. We're not jumping on planes. Those conferences have been canceled. There aren't sporting events. There is something of a hard stop in the U.S. economy, unlike anything we've seen. It's a little bit like the days after 9/11, potentially, but potentially extended for much longer than that. And that is something that economists are trying to grapple with, and we're going to need some kind of big economic response, and I think markets are still going to be looking at that come next week. The other big thing is it's not just a U.S. phenomenon. The European economy is slowing down in a big way. China has gone through its big economic shock and is coming out the other side, but at the same time, we've seen a slowdown in demand there, big slowdown in demand out of Japan and South Korea and places like that. The global economy is really confronting the likelihood, not just the possibility, of slipping into recession in the first and second quarter of this year. That is not something that the U.S. economy is going to be able to avoid, and you need a global response from that. It isn't just about getting Congress to agree on a fiscal plan. It's about getting a big coordinated response like the ones that we had in 2008.
Right. All right. Sean Donnan, thank you so much. Always good to catch up with you, one of our most senior reporters and one of the voices we really turn to down in D.C. And as we leave you, Sean, I have to say, I enjoyed your tweet earlier asking for a friend, how much bourbon do you need to stock up on to get through the next month?
Never enough?
Never enough. It's a good question that needs to be answered.
All right. Levity there.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol?
We do want to bring in our next guest. Jamie Metzel, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, Technology Futurist, former Director on the U.S. National Security Council, the State Department, and on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He joins us on the phone from New York. His book, by the way, we've talked with him about this in the past. I think it's now out in paperback. Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity. Jamie, you're such the perfect person to talk to right now. What a day, what a week, what a couple of weeks, to be fair. Give us kind of your big picture at this point.
Well, thanks, Carol. I'm happy to be back with you guys. This is really, really serious. And I think most people in the United States are starting to fully wake up to the magnitude of what's happening. The biggest thing, the biggest threat is still the threat of contagion. Here in New York, but around the country, we just don't know how many people have been infected so far. But I think it's safe to say that it's many orders of magnitude greater than the number of people who have been reported. And even if the fatality rate is less than the 3.4% that the World Health Organization had claimed last week, even if it's closer to the 0.6% from South Korea or 1%, that's going to potentially mean a lot of fatalities, a lot of disruption, especially to older people. It makes sense that we're having these cascades of closures because